Calling this meeting to order. Want to welcome you to your POA Board's monthly meeting. Today the board will consider the 2022 budget and the 2023 through 2032 plan for approval. So thanks for attending today, whether in person or via the live stream. Quick reminder about our process. As the board works through each agenda item, I will ask for board comments and questions first. Once that's complete, I will ask for comments or questions from those in attendance or those on the live stream. If an item is to be voted on, there will be a request for a motion and a second from the board, followed by board discussion. Prior to the actual vote, I will ask for audience comments. When we get to the budget portion of the agenda, I will first ask for audience comments before the board votes, because there's a number of things we have to vote on to pass the budget. To facilitate audience participation, I ask that you step to the microphone, identify yourself, and use the microphone so that your comments can be picked up on the live stream. Comments from live stream participants will be relayed to those in the room by the POA communications personnel. When we get to the part of the meeting titled Other on the agenda, I will first ask board members if they have any other non-agenda items to discuss. Once that is completed, I will ask members of the audience if they have other issues that they wish to address to the board. So with that, let's get started. May I have a motion to approve the October 20th, 2021 TVPOA Board meeting minutes as presented?
So moved.
Marty? Second? Pat? Discussion? All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. The next agenda item is the CEO's operations update. As a reminder, earlier this year we asked the CEO to do a quarterly operations report for the board. Additionally, we asked him to give an update to that report each month between the quarterly reports. So with that, Winston, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will do my report by a departmental basis. So first I'm going to start with the admin departments. Finances, I can emphasize how very strong the finances are at this point in time of the year. It's the best I've ever seen as far as revenues, net income, cash. Any way you slice it and dice it, it's looking very good. I do want to caution the board, though I have seen upticks like this in the past. This was 2005, 6, and 7, and then I saw at a very rapid pace the bottom drop out. Kevin's going to cover more of this later today, go through the complete financial review, and he will cover all the pertinent details at that time. Next department I want to cover is the ACC Department. The ACC Department and ACC Committee have had a very tough year this year. They've permitted 323 single-family homes. They have 19 permits on the table for tomorrow's review, and at my best guess, calculating the current amount and the pace we have for the rest of the year, we will probably permit over 350 homes in 2021. This in reference to 2020, which was deemed to be a very good year. We permitted 208 single-family homes. The two most active neighborhoods getting permits are the Tokwa neighborhood at 65 and the Chattooga neighborhood at 58. In regards to that, we reached a milestone in October of this year, counting single-family and multi-family units. So I'm going to basically just use the term units, family units, living units. I'm sorry. We crossed the milestone of 5,000 living units this month. That was, I forgot which permit that was, but anyway, to date, the living units are 5,023, which equates to over 10,046 property owners in Tellico Village. HR, As most of you have heard that listen to the news, there's been federal mandates given about COVID vaccines, and the mandates, organizations over 100 personnel must comply with these mandates. Our HR team has developed the plan, putting together the plan, studying the voluminous documents that was put out by the government on what we have to conform to. We are looking at that, evaluating our company, our employees, and so forth, and putting the steps necessary to be compliant with that. It is under review by the court system right now. We're not sure if it's kind of in limbo, and we're not sure of the direction it's going to go. But come January, we want to be prepared regardless of, and not have to scramble at the last minute. One change that we have seen versus the last 3 years when it comes to the benefits section of employment. The previous 3 years we've had minimal, and in fact 1 year we had a decrease in our insurance premiums. That has caught up with us this year. It looks like it's going to be between 20 and 23% this year to maintain the insurances for employees. This was built into the budget, and this is a cost that's shared between the employer and the employee. But I guess it's safe to say our good luck ran out on insurance renewals on this 4th year. Currently, in openings, we have 7 openings in the village. So if we have any able-bodied persons that's looking for employment, please contact me. It's been very difficult for the past 2 years to try to find replacements. Marketing. This is a department that has been with us now for almost 10 years. Beth, let's see, your 10th year will be next year, right, Beth? Officially, even though unofficially she started in the fall prior to that. But we have had very good, very positive results to our marketing operation in the last 3 years. The discovery requests are almost double what they were last year, and 31 more than we had in 2019 before the COVID hit. The Wellness Center traffic remains strong. That facility, that building, sees over 1,000 people come through the operation through October. It's been over 1,000 for both 21, 20, and 19. So we have a lot of property owners, and we have a lot of marketing efforts come through that building over there in a year's time. The important stat, and I think 10 years ago when the board was contemplating marketing and the need for that in the village, one of the areas that they wanted addressed, other than just the obvious benefit of marketing the village, since CCI, the developer, had pulled out of that area, was to reduce the amount of lots the POA was having sitting in this suspended state where they don't generate any revenue. To Beth's and her team's credit, they have sold 246 lots this year. And if in my weak math skills, next year alone, those 246 will generate somewhere around $450,000 alone. Just next year, those sales that took place in 21. Some of them have already started generating revenue that she has sold this year. In total, when I went back and looked through 2012 and to date in 21, it's 653 total lots that she's reduced out of that suspended file where we never collect anything. And that's going to generate almost $1.2 million next year. So, you know, it was a slow start getting off the ground in 2012 and 13 and so forth and so on. And I realized, you know, a lot of people use the logic that the rising tide raises all ships, etc. But I think, in my mind, with the lots and with the market value of homes, no matter how you slice it, I think we are far above where we would have been had we continued to do nothing. In the years before Beth came on board, we would sell 1 to 4 lots a year, and generally that would be about it. Some years 0. So it's been a success from that standpoint. Next department I want to cover is golf.
May I interrupt for a second?
Certainly.
And I know Beth has already got the question, but I can feel the vibe coming in through the internet. Is how many POA lots do we own?
How many you got in inventory now, Beth? Yes, now would be a good time.
Okay, so we have 325 POA-owned lots. That means we pay taxes. That means we don't get an assessment fee. Now, here's the next question. And last time I talked to you, you had this number. How many lots are available for building in Tellico Village that the POA does not own? In other words, owned by someone other than this association?
Around 1,400.
1,400. So we have 1,400 lots that somebody can build on that we have no control over, and we have 325 lots that we own, the association owns. So let me ask Rick. So Rick, can we in any way tell those 1,400 people that they can't build a house on their lot?
By what standard would we ever issue a rule like that?
Well, and that's my question, because
There is no, we cannot prevent people from building on their lots, but we can control some of the architectural detail.
As long as they meet the ACC rules and
absolutely,
regulations.
but I'm talking in terms of growth to the Tellico Parkway that you hear a lot in social media. So there are 1,425 lots out there that we have absolutely no control whether they build a home on it or not. So if John Doe in Cincinnati, Ohio owns that lot, John and his wife can come down here and build on it. We can't stop them.
That's true.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure.
I'm happy to be your straight man.
Okay.
Next department I want to cover is golf. Golf is having another very strong year. This year, to our surprise, is even better than 2020, when everybody was forced to do anything outside that had to be golf related. The rounds are up 25% versus 2020. We're running at 30% above what we considered normal prior to the COVID era. So 30% more than 2018-19 standards, what we considered normal then. So it's been very good in that aspect. Also, merchandise sales are up. They are seeing great. And I want to put a plug in for everybody getting ready to do their Christmas shopping and so forth. And I want to thank all the property owners that support our golf operation. And the reason I'm doing that is because the more you use our golf courses, and Pat, this is your theme that you've preached for years, the more you use our golf courses and the more you shop with our pro shops, you generate revenue that can be plowed back into the golf world. And that plowing money back into the golf world will be used things and improve our practice facilities and other beneficial things that just make our golf operation better. But on the current pace that we're going at right now, I estimate that we'll exceed 105,000 rounds of golf at our 3 golf courses. And basically what I did was take 2021 year-to-date. I looked at 2020's November and December, added those rounds in there, and it comes out 105, 106, 107, somewhere in that range. So kudos to our golf team for their hard work. It's been very tough on them, even though the usage has been increased greatly over the past 2 years. They're having difficulty finding the staff to man the golf maintenance areas. And it's been very hard, very taxing and so forth. And I know that some of them practically live here during the summer months. And so I want to thank them for their hard work and congratulate them on their successful outcome.
Can I ask something else?
Certainly.
Okay. So if we recall, those who have been keeping up with this, I think it was 2 years ago, the golf subsidy was $1.8 million, somewhere in that range. Mm-hmm. And from the Golf Advisory Committee meeting the other day, what was reported is through the month of October, revenue above expenses, the subsidy, if it was called today, would be $370,715.
One addition, you have to also subtract out your capital expenditures, which is not on the income statement.
Sure, yeah, significantly lower than it's ever been.
Well,
And this goes back to what you said. The villagers are playing the golf courses, utilizing the asset. Chris and his folks are keeping them in pristine, wonderful condition, and it's paying off.
yes, exactly, Pat. The golf operation is running $900,000 better than they had budgeted in their income statement. So kudos to that group for pushing that, and I want to thank the property owners for utilizing our golf and continue to do so. Next department I'm going to report on is rec. First things I want to cover are some scheduling changes that will be effective next week for Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday, all facilities will close at 5 p.m. Wednesday's the day before Thanksgiving. Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, all rec facilities will be closed. And then Friday, the 26th, they resume regular hours of operation so everybody can work that turkey off. But the rec department has had a very successful year. Simon has done a great job on putting new programs together. A program that I have pushed and asked for and questioned for probably in excess of 10 or 15 years, he enacted, and that's basically getting down there on the water and putting together some sort of a program where we have our property owners enjoy the lake that we are built on. And last year in the kayak paddleboard area, he had over 650 property owners use that throughout the season. And Simon, thank you. That's a very good ad. Appreciate you doing that. He's been working on some first impression cosmetic upgrades at the Chota building, pool deck, and the brick was painted, trying to make it look a little bit more updated. Memberships are slowly climbing back towards the 2019 numbers. Usage is up in all areas, but two of the most gains have come in the group fitness and water exercise classes. So we're starting to see a resumption to normal activity in the rec world. Also in the rec world that Simon had a great deal to do with, the Timeless Teleco has reached a goal of raising over $200,000. Most of that money came from private donations. They had a well-attended Raise the Roof party and pickleball tournament, raised over $20,000. We've had maintenance shutdowns at Toqua and the Wellness Center. This is something that Simon started years ago when he came to work here. And it's needed to get the building completely empty so we can get in there to do necessary renovations and painting and improvements and so forth. And I think the property owners have now realized it's to their long-term benefit to do that, and they have accepted it, and now just realize that's part of normal operations. In the rec world, a note I would like to mention about staffing. Simon, who was once the Tennessee rec president for the state of Tennessee, has been appointed to the state of Tennessee TRPEF Board, Tennessee Recreations and Parks Education Foundation. So Simon continues to shine as a representative for Tellico Village in the state of Tennessee, the rec world. And some of the byproduct of that is his ability to go out and get advice and help and bring that back to Tellico Village. His staff is continuing their training, and they are going through various certifications and training programs to make our staff better in that area. So kudos to our rec department and staff for going outside and trying to improve themselves along with our operation. The next department I want to talk about is Public Works. This is the department that basically makes the gears in Tellico Village run. Streets, water, sewer, roadways, drainage areas, common property, maintenance of buildings, all that. They have finished the PMM this year. The weather has gotten cool enough that the adhesion is a problem, so they're going to terminate that for this year. and when it starts to rewarm in the spring, they will get back on it. I asked the question why we didn't get it done as we'd anticipated, and we had a vendor that kept promising to get on it and promised, but for COVID reasons, they could never deliver. Clayton finally just ditched them and went with Plan B, and we got as much accomplished as we could, the weather permitting, in 21. Finished the sign renovations in Chattooga and started in the Malacqua neighborhoods. They'll complete the final phase of the signpost project before the end of November. They've been working on the Kahiti Trail riprap ditch. Clayton didn't like the riprap in the ditch, so he wanted that removed. They're going to make that a mowable surface, and it will look a lot more appealing as you drive into the neighborhood. Patchwork has been going on in various areas throughout the village that's needed. They've been working on the prep for the new Toqua parking lot, and leaf pickup has started. Not at my house, but it has started here. Next department I want to cover is food service, and much like the POA, the food service operation has had a very strong year, and once again, the month of October has been very strong. On the POA side of the equation, for those that are familiar with the situation, you have our POA income statement on the facilities that those restaurants are located in, and then the contractor has operational income statement on the food service part of the business. But in our aspect of the 4 restaurants, we are running better than budget by $240,000. And that's very good management on Mitzi's part, and just taking care of our P's and Q's as we've gone throughout the year. The Kahiti Clubhouse operation is the operation that we fully run, and they are doing very good also, running a $33,000 subsidy, but are still ahead of budget by over $63,000. And just for those that collect numbers, I'll give you these. Yacht Club year-to-date sales is $1.241 million. The Toqua sales year-to-date is $945,000. Tenassi year-to-date sales is $1,019,000, and Kahiti is coming in at $421,000 for the year. And I remember when we thought Kahiti did $200,000 was a good year. So kudos again to all the property owners for their support of their restaurants, and let's keep it up. The more we spend in-house, the better off we are financially. Any questions about any of those departments or my report?
Any questions from the board? Any questions in the audience for Winston? Yes.
Give it a
It's not on. Yeah. Clayton will help you.
Okay, is it on?
Yep, it's on.
Okay. For those who don't know me, I'm Ken Boline, been here for 23 years in the village, served on the board for 3 years, served on the finance committee for 8 years. Based on this fine report, I assume when you get to the budget, I haven't been to the budget meetings this year, that you're certainly not going to raise the dues 5%. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Any other comments or questions from the audience? And Mitzi's up next.
Yeah, Mitzi's going to cover some dock operations news.
All right, thank you. Recently, I reported on the number of folks that we have on our wait list once we took the Cooper boat slip list and the POA list and combined those. And what I want to talk to you now is, in addition to this wait list that we also have what's called a move list. These folks are people who actually have a slip already and have just put in a request to move. They might like to move to a different location. Various reasons. It may be the way they enter and exit their boat, or it may be due to being under certain lighting. So for that reason, we've taken a look at these lists to see, okay, what can we do to truly accommodate the people who are waiting on a slip? These people don't have a slip at all. They have paid a $250 deposit. So I went to the Marine Advisory Committee this week along with Pat White, and I'm sure he'll add to my presentation shortly. But the Marine Advisory, along with Pat and myself, have created a subcommittee. What we're going to do, what we're proposing that the folks do is, in the ACC department, is contact those people that we can accommodate their move request, first off, from the ones that may want to move from Kahidi to Loudon because of where they live, and vice versa. I did verify with our ACC department that currently in Kahidi, we have 5 people who have a slip over there, but they live here in the Loudon portion. So we're going to call those 5 people first, offer them one of these new 36 slips that we have in Tanasi, get those moved. Then, you know, there will be some vacancies there in Kahidi, so we'll work our way back to then the wait list and say, okay, those of you that are waiting, we do have some slips available in Kahidi. In the meantime, this subcommittee that we've created through the Marine Advisory, we're going to get together and put together in writing new procedure or policy, if you will, regarding this move list, how that move list will work, what kind of criteria you have to meet in order to be on this move list. In addition, there would be a fee, an administrative fee, associated with that move list. And so our goal would be to obviously minimize this move list, get the people who don't have a slip at all off this waiting list, and let's try to get those people a slip. Pat, do you want to add to that, or I can see him moving his fingers over there. He had a big part in this as well.
No, and this is something that the Marine Advisory Committee's been dealing with a long time. And then when we put the slip in, the 36 slips at Tanasi, historically we've gone to when there is an open slip, you go to the wait list and fill it, and you exhaust that until you go to the wait list. So you get the internal moves first. And with 32, I don't remember how many there were, but there were about 12 pages of people on a move list. It is astronomical, which means that you call somebody on a wait list. I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. You call somebody on a move list, say, we've got a slip in Tanasi, do you want it? They say no. That's ongoing. So a few of them have been filled. And then you continue to go down that list, and all the time you have 36 slips that we've had over there for the month of November, basically, that's open, not generating revenue. And you have people that have bought a boat that's either in storage or parked somewhere or at a dealer that they want to use the boat, that we can't give them an opportunity, even though we have 36 slips. So the Marine Advisory Committee comes up with this solution with the large number of slips, and the astronomical number on the move list is fill the open slips first, is fill that dock up. There are people out there that do not have a boat that want to put their boat in the water. But then their counter to that in their debate was, but you have people that are 18 miles away in Kahidi that should get an opportunity to move to Loudoun County, and the people that are in Loudoun County should get an opportunity. So that's the answer that we've come up with on the Marine Advisory Committee. Also, along with that, is they formed a subcommittee to come up with a structured move list plan, and that is what Mitzi referred to. And on that subcommittee, they've elected, in the Marine Advisory Committee, which are property owners, they elected to come up with a 5-member subcommittee, 2 of which are not on the Marine Advisory Committee. One is associated with boating and has a boat in a slip, and the other one is on either the wait or the move list. In other words, a Tellico Village property owner that's being directly affected by not being able to put their boat in the water. So we're going to make this move first, and then we're going to go back to the list to start moving people around that we've generated by moving folks and generating 32 open slips, spaces that other villagers could move to if they so desire. and we'll get back with you later on the outcome of that subcommittee in the Marine Advisory Committee.
And these calls are actually going to start as soon as next week. Clayton has advised they've already started reaching out to some of the Kahidi folks, but then the new people who are on the wait list, you will be getting calls as soon as next week to potentially take one of these tenacity slips.
And Mitzi, as I understand it, you're going to bring the process for the new move list to the board next month?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions for Mitzi from the board? Any from the audience? Okay, thank you. The next agenda item is a strategic land purchase proposal. Carla Johnson is going to talk about it.
Thank you, Rick. So this is something that the board discussed during the October meeting, and it is, in my mind, coincides with the strategy of the land acquisition from CCI. And as you remember, our thought on that was that our destiny is now a matter of choice. It's no longer up to chance. And so I asked the board for consideration of purchasing the 8.74 acres at the entrance to the Kahidi neighborhood of Tellico Village. And this is the, go ahead, Shannon, to the next slide. This is the listing. It is currently on the market. It is on the Chattanooga MLS system. One of our Tellico Village property owners, who is a realtor, did a little research and finally ran it down because she kept saying it's not on the Knoxville MLS, but she found it in Chattanooga, and it is currently listed at $200,000. And that's a little teeny tiny picture, but if you go to the next slide, you can see, so that's Kahidi Trail where the split, where it comes right in the entrance. And then just past that road cut is where the guardhouse is, there at the entrance to Kahidi. So that's the parcel of land there, 8.74 acres, that's currently available. The next slide gives you the satellite view of that same little area there. So you can see over kind of on the right-hand side, the little guard shack there, so that gives you perspective of where that piece of property is. Since it's been on the market, there has been some interest in the property. Two people that we know of who were interested in the property approached the ACC with preliminary plans for cursory review. One of those was a condo-style garage storage with 20 units, and the other was 50 townhome units. And the townhome plan included clear-cutting the property and adding townhomes that would back up to Kahidi Trail. So that wasn't obviously our first choice for that property there. So you can see on the next slide, oh, sorry, that's what I just told you. The next slide is a picture of the proposed condo garages. So that's where they would sit on the lot, according to this particular person of interest, even though that road cut would be before you get to the guard shack. The reason that road cut is before the guard shack is because when Cooper designated that, he designated it as commercial property, and he envisioned that something would be there that people might want to access off of Niles Ferry Road without coming all the way into the Kahidi neighborhood. So in my mind, if we develop that for something for Tellico Village, we should move that road cut so that it's actually inside the neighborhood, inside the guard shack. So the next slide shows you the proposed townhouse plan, and that's how he was going to shoehorn 50 units into that spot, and like I said, completely clear cut with the back of those units right off of Kahidi Trail. And I don't know what you guys think of that, but I felt like going into the entrance of our Tellico Village neighborhood, that was not really the view that we would probably want to see there. And so thankfully, the ACC said, put the kibosh on that plan. So the next slide gives you my kind of argument for controlling our destiny with this piece of property. As you know, the CCI strategic land acquisition was pursued as an investment in our future to control our destiny. For this reason, it seems unwise for the future of this very visible parcel at the entrance to our Monroe County neighborhood to be left to chance. This land provides a buffer for the adjacent farmland, which could be sold in the future. If this parcel is clear-cut, there would be no buffer between the village and whatever may be developed on that land. And while the property is subject to the ACC Red Book or Blue Book, if it becomes redesignated as residential, there are limits to the restrictions we can impose, which leaves open the possibility of undesirable development. And if you remember, if you attended the town hall, or if you watched that, or if you've read the information, you know, that's one of the things is that we like the idea of being able to determine the best possible use for Tellico Village property owners as opposed to the undesirable development coming in to our land. So if this property's designation were changed to residential and townhouses were constructed, it would likely have a negative impact on the investment in parcels of land that the POA is currently purchasing from CCI that would likely be planned for townhouses. So next slide, Shannon. So I asked this board to make the choice, not to leave it to chance. And so in keeping with our goal of controlling our destiny, the choice to me is clear. It will be prudent for the POA to purchase this parcel of land to ensure the best possible use for Tellico Village property owners now and in the future. The land is currently on the market, as I mentioned earlier, for $200,000. And while this purchase price may be negotiated and is likely to be negotiated, it seems a reasonable investment considering the benefit to Tellico Village and especially our plans for other property being acquired in Monroe County. So the board voted during the October executive session to direct the CEO to pursue the purchase of this property and included $175,000 in the 2022 budget for this purpose. And that was
Just clarification, it was an advisory vote? That kind of, we're going to vote on it in
Correct.
public today?
correct. So, and that $175,000 was based on what our resident expert, Beth Kaburka, felt like that we could likely purchase that piece of property for. So. that
Okay, so
concludes
I'm going to ask for a motion, and the motion would be to authorize the POA's chief executive officer to engage in negotiations to purchase an 8.74 acre tract of land adjacent to the Kahidi neighborhood entrance, designated as parcel 048A B002.00, for a price not to exceed $175,000, and to report to the board the funding methodology. The final purchase agreement is to be brought back to the board for final approval. Do I have that motion, Carla?
So moved.
Second? Pat? Discussion? Yes, Bruce?
I'll reiterate what I said in the executive meeting when we had this discussion is, number one, I don't see the need for the board to do this or the POA to do this, and the reason why is because it sets a huge precedence for us for other properties that we have in the village that are of similar nature. Since that meeting, it's come to my attention by way of our GM or CEO that we have a very similar situation along 444. One that we dodged a bullet when they wanted to build a four-level high-rise, and the other one is at the corner of, and that one was at, let's see, Davis Ferry, and the other one at Maple Hill, where at one time they were thinking about putting in a car wash. So all three of these are already under the control of the Red Book, which basically means they have to come through the ACC, and we have control. The big difference between this strategic investment and the one that we're doing with CCI, we already have developer rights for this lot as well as the other two. And there probably are other lots of similar nature in the village that could cause neighborhoods problems with what someone may want to build there. I remind you of the Dollar General. So at any rate, we're setting a bad precedence here. I think that for us to try to control what's built in a village by buying pieces of property that we don't want people building on is not the way to do it. The way to do it is enforce our rules through the Red Book and or the Blue Book. So I was opposed to it then, and I just don't think it's a good idea to do this.
taking the adversarial approach to my buddy over here. The term huge precedent to me means when you set a precedent, that implies that we'll be obligated to perform a similar action if presented that action in the future. And that's not what this is to me. This is a strategic piece of property sitting on the, lack of a better term, sitting right between your eyes, or just a little bit technically to your right eye, driving into one of our most prominent, fastest growing neighborhoods, that even if we control through the Red Book, we don't have full control because of the designation of that property. We're not obligated to buy anything, anytime, unless we want to. And by purchasing a single piece of property doesn't mean that we're going to set a precedent to purchase another piece of property, whether that is at Poplar Springs or at 72 or anywhere in the middle. If we see fit to do that in order to protect the ambiance or the way Tellico Village looks, then that's the decision that we'll make. And I feel that this piece of property sitting on that hill to the right side of that guard shack in your face, if there's a commercial property sitting there, it could very possibly affect the entire Kahidi neighborhood, being a single entrance neighborhood.
At a minimum, Pat, I agree with you. However, I would also say you're liable to be labeled as playing favorites on the board.
Well, we're liable to be labeled anything at any time on this board, believe me.
I do agree that, but.
Well, and honestly, I mean, if other parcels of land in key areas come for sale, I think it would be wise for this board to consider purchasing them as well. If they're, if they're in key locations and they could be used for something that serves a need of the property owners in the village, then it seems like the right thing to do to consider purchasing, whether it's this piece of property or others that may come on the market in the future. The other two properties that you mentioned are not currently on the market. So we don't have that option to consider them at this point.
So Bruce, you referenced the fact that the CEO had informed you of the other pieces of property. I'm going to call on him to discuss that.
Well, over the years, I've seen this board squirm through various aspects of things that they had very little control over. And henceforth, that was one of the reasons that I preached so vehemently to this board over a year ago about getting developer rights and why that's an excellent thing to have for the long term. But in this particular case, as I said in my November 4th email to the board, I hope all of you got it, I have consternation about this one piece being purchased like that because of several different reasons. Bruce mentioned we got two very similar pieces. There's another piece that's not exactly spot on, but it has potential for problem. We're getting ready to spend $5.3 million on a CCI purchase. Inflation, who knows how that's going to go. The last Wall Street Journal report was it was in excess of 5-point-something%, and I think that's just the beginning. There's just a myriad of reasons, and I'm a conservative person, so buying this now causes me problem on top of the $4 million that we're getting ready to take out of our checking account. The 1.3 we're getting ready to take out of our checking account right now. So, seeing how the economy turned in 2007 and 8 and 9, when the group from California was in here and they could sell anything for 10 times what it was worth, and then it seemed like overnight that just dried up and fell in our lap and caused us a great deal of lots sitting still. I have a great fear about biting off too much at one time. If the board was to ask me, my proposal would be to take a look at all three of these pieces of property, study what action should be taken and how it should be taken, and look at it from a total strategic move, because all three of these properties are very similar in their characteristics.
Other discussion from the board?
Couple of questions. From an education point of view, I realize the ACC would have control over the commercial building or residential. If it was residential, are there any POA fees that come this way, Winston? Like assessments on the property?
If it was developed,
Yes.
yes, for each living unit.
Now, if it's commercial,
If it's commercial, it would be deemed how many units that would be put in it. Like if it was just one facility, it would be one. If it was a strip center and had 4 offices, it would be 4 assessments.
okay? I tend to agree with you now after you brought to the board the other 3 properties. I think what we need, I'd like to see is a total plan strategic for all properties that would be similar in nature. While I understand it's right there in your right eye as you drive into Kahidi, biting this off with everything else we're looking at without addressing the other 3 that you identified, I think would be a mistake.
Other discussion from the board?
So I have a question too. So supposedly this was plotted for both the commercial and the townhomes, correct? So I guess the question I have is why neither?
It's not platted for townhomes, it's platted commercial. It can be changed to residential.
So was the 50 townhomes, was that plan submitted to the ACC? And so I guess my question is, why did that not go any further, or why did that stop?
And I can add a little clarity on that. It wasn't formally submitted to the ACC. It was given for a cursory review. And frankly, there were a lot of utility issues that came up on the front end. And when the proposed developer was asked how they intended to handle some of the utility access issues, they backed out of the process. So it wasn't purely an aesthetic concern, but there were also a number of utility issues related to that property, and in particular, in order to service 50 units.
So they're going to, so the point then is there's going to be other hurdles that somebody's going to have to jump over to be able to develop that property.
Any development would require some significant
Yeah.
utility infrastructure.
But if they can buy that piece of property for $200,000 or less, and they think they can put 50 units in there, then somebody will step up and take care of providing the utilities, because there's a lot of money to be made off of 50 units.
When they brought it to the
townhouses.
ACC, one of the things that was raised by the ACC was the density. And they said, and what the builder was told is that we will never approve 50 units for that space.
But that doesn't negate the fact that there's a lot of money to be made, even if he has 30 units.
I understand that. I'm just,
Somebody will step up
I'm just
and take
making
care
sure
of
we all
utilities.
understand the history.
Marty,
that
on
kind of
your
money.
question about the potential there, if you'll remember when talking about the CCI project and the lands and so forth, whereas we're used to a plat has already been laid out and basically people are buying a lot and it's pretty much cut and dry from that process. On this tract of land, the 10 acres Chattooga Peninsula that we're having an option on and so forth, it's got to start from scratch. Roads, infrastructure, you know, the various utilities that have to cooperate. And given the high scrutiny that Public Works has been given, water, sewer, and runoff, you know, it's going to be vetted, I'm sure, very strictly before they agree to any kind of a permit on that. So that's the reason my conservative nature, and because of those hurdles, kind of gives me some comfort that it just can't be something thrown up over a midnight range.
I also had a conversation, I'm sorry, with Beth Kuberka just about this particular piece of property. And, you know, one of the, when we talk about the best use, best land use for property owners, this could definitely meet a need that is quite prominent in Kahidi, and that is we don't have any type of storage available out there. No boat trailer storage, no RV storage, anything. And her comment was that we could, you know, pretty quickly get that up and running and generate revenue for that while keeping a nice buffer of trees, you know, between between any storage and Kahiti Trail, so you wouldn't even be able to see it. And then also, the community gardens were located in that spot, and they moved them temporarily for 1 year over to the Dock Road when that land was under contract by the builder who wanted to create the townhouses. We could move the community gardens back over there permanently, which is a good spot and much easier than the amount of work that Clayton and his guys are going to have to do to move it over to an area that, you know, is densely wooded and would have to be, you know, cleared to allow for any sunshine for a community garden. So it would serve an immediate need and could start generating revenue very quickly, just with that idea. Not that that would be, you know, the final decision, but, you know, there are land uses for that property that would serve our village property owners very well. And like I said, I just feel like, you know, while I agree that those other properties should be considered, this one is the one that's on the market currently. And so I just, like I said, I just hate the idea of leaving it to chance because we don't know. You know, we don't know what somebody will want to put in there. It's currently designated commercial. And it would have to be, and it's my understanding that that designation is contractual through the sale from Cooper to the current owner. So I'm not exactly sure what steps would have to be taken to get it redesignated to residential, but anyway.
So I have a couple questions, Carla. So you're talking about putting storage units up, and I just am reluctant to think that that's going to be attractive going into.
Well, you wouldn't be able to see it.
How would that be?
Because, I mean, we're not talking, I don't think we're talking storage units, we're just talking secured storage, so it.
Okay,
so
I guess I don't know what the difference
just be-
is.
It'd be a fenced-in
Not
area.
a structure, not,
Oh,
it wouldn't
good.
be a structure. It's
Okay.
just like the storage that's in the village.
Okay, and then your confidence level that you said it could happen, or your thought is that it would be able.
Well, I mean, that was just my conversation with Beth.
Okay.
And I don't
So-
know, I mean,
Okay, all right.
that
Well,
was
I'm
just a
looking at
conversation about a potential
the
land
possibility
use.
of getting, you know, rather quick revenue off of this. So, okay,
Right.
so this is
Come
a
back.
projection. So,
Just, you know,
yeah,
Okay.
okay. My next question
One
is
more.
to this, Kevin. Do you have any thought where that money would come from?
it's currently in the budget.
It's,
Oh,
It would be
that's true.
taken out of operating cash or one of the reserve accounts if the board so chooses. I mean, like Winston said, we've got favorability right now, but
Well,
a lot can change.
yeah, okay. All right,
Carl, I agree with all the different ideas. I just want to point out to the board that this huge step that you all are about to take, that I'm responsible for, along with what I've lived through, it scares me. I still think it's the right step to take, and I think it's a great move long-term for the village. And that could be exactly what the property needs to turn into, but I think it would be prudent for the board to look at all of the properties and all the properties that they're obtaining from Cooper, and let the committee members, let the staff, let this board, future boards ascertain a unified plan
Pat?
at
Yeah,
one
okay,
time.
speaking of what Sue was talking on, so if I'm hearing this correctly, we have a red book commercial authorization process that they would have to go through, but then we're talking about putting a storage unit up there that you could make invisible because we have the control to make the person that has the property make it invisible or not, which we could do to anybody that bought the property, correct?
Yeah, I'm not
No,
so
that's
sure
not
that I agree
correct.
with that.
We don't have that
We
kind
don't
of,
have authority to require tree buffers to remain on any particular property.
Okay, so.
Our authority is relative to the aesthetics of the improvement itself.
Okay, so then the understanding that I would then have is that we could ruin the aesthetics, being the POA, and put a storage lot up there, or we could give it to somebody else to ruin the aesthetics, or we could say we're going to put a commercial venue there and not ruin the aesthetics. Correct?
yeah, I would
Okay.
assume.
Obviously, we wouldn't ruin the aesthetics.
Right,
I mean, we
obviously,
wouldn't make that
would not.
decision.
Right, I understand.
Well,
But I still have the issues with the entrance, the exit, turning in at the guard shack, making that turn, going down a hill, et cetera, with the storage unit being up there.
So-
Somebody's gonna,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, please. I'm
So
done.
Kevin Stevens, then with the Red Book, so say we don't buy it, somebody else buys it, and they want to put something up. Exactly what control do we have?
Yeah, that's one of the real challenges with the Red Book. And this particular property is designated commercial, not by plat, but by a deed restriction from Cooper Communities when they sold it to the third party. With respect to what our authority is as an ACC, we really can, from the commercial standpoint, we can evaluate the site plan, we can evaluate parking, lighting, and all the aesthetics of the site itself. We also can evaluate the aesthetics of the building and improvement itself. But we don't have a whole lot of control over use. In terms of, if it is commercial, we can't necessarily say whether it can be a convenience store or a gas station.
So we
or
can't
anything
say,
in
yeah,
particular.
we don't
can't
want a
designate
convenience store.
Specific commercial uses or prohibited uses. Rather, we can designate the required aesthetics for any commercial facility.
So, Kevin, though, we could restrict their use of our road, correct? The only access to that right now is off of Kahidi Trail up the hill.
Well, they would become a property owner within the confines of Tellico Village, so I don't think we could restrict the use in that regard.
And we cannot impose any deed restrictions unless we own the deed, unless we own the property.
But through the ACC, just like we did at Dollar General, we brought, through the ACC and through public pressure, we put pressure to bear on what they were going to do there to the point that they changed their plans significantly just to get our approval.
Absolutely. Like, we can't say that you can't put in a Dollar General, and that was a big discussion at the time. People didn't like the concept of what was being built there. We can't say that, but we can have a very strong position relative to the aesthetics of the building that will ultimately go up.
But we can't keep them from cutting down any trees. They can completely clear cut that, which would leave us with no buffer to the adjacent property.
That's a risk.
But we could bring pressure to bear for them to leave the trees there.
Bring pressure, but they don't have to do it. I mean, and I just want you to know, when I talked to Beth about potential uses for that property, that was just what that was, a discussion of potential uses. I don't have any, set in stone ideas about what it should be. The set in stone idea I have is that we just shouldn't leave it to chance.
Before I ask the board for a vote, any comments from the audience? Yes.
I still have a question, Rick.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. Kevin, this states that the 175,000 is in the 2022 budget.
It is.
What department's it in? Because I was just looking at the detail real quick.
It's in admin.
Admin, Maggie?
Ken?
Okay, Ken, is it on now? Ken Mullane, again, I've lived here for 23 years, on the board for 3, and on the advisory committee, or finance advisory committee for 8, so I know a little bit about this village. I have a question for the board members. How many are aware that 19 years ago, the board passed a bylaw that allows a neighborhood who's going to benefit from some improvement and no one else, then they can vote to pay for that improvement themselves. They have to take a vote, and if they vote for it, then they have it. They pay for it. You aware of that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, there's 7 other neighborhoods in this community. I live in children. There's a farm behind me. I want to know when you're going to buy that farm, because I'm tired of what some of the stuff that guy's doing on that farm. It's adjacent to me. And every other neighborhood has got this problem. Even Topua has Topua Cove. Tenassi has Tenassi Hills. Every neighborhood has property adjacent to it. You are not going to fix the problem by buying this property next to Kahidi. Now, Kahidi, here's my proposal. I suggest we do one of 2 things. First of all, you can consider amending this motion so that Kahidi has the right to vote, to buy that property and pay for it. It's their property. They want it. This only affects Kahidi. I don't care what you say, I listen to everybody here. This affects Kahidi and Kahidi only. So let Kahidi pay for it, let Kahidi own it, they can do whatever they want with it. Now, if that's not, you can't do that, you can't make that amendment, then at least vote to table this. Because it's pretty obvious that we don't know all the things that are affecting us if you make this decision. As Winston says, you're making a big decision here, and I don't think you know what you're doing. So table it and think about it, and bring it back up. Or let Kahidi buy it.
Thank you, Ken.
Well, technically, if Kahidi buys it, it doesn't belong to Kahidi, correct? It belongs to the POA.
I would assume so.
Yeah, and I agree, Ken.
And it'd still be subject to the red and blue book
Yeah,
rules.
what you're saying is exact, but if Kahidi, because if you read the covenants, restrictions, bylaws, et cetera, it does say that they're a unique neighborhood and have options to do things that Loudoun County residents don't. But if they amass the money, the 175, make the purchase, it belongs to the POA, all of us.
Excuse me, I do want to add a little point of clarification about that bylaw provision. It's not as broadly worded as it was expressed. That's really, that provision was for maintenance of the Kahidi Guardhouse primarily. It says the Board of Directors may fix, establish, and collect maintenance fees from the owners of lots and living units in Kahidi, which shall be used exclusively for the cost of maintenance and operation of the entrance structure or features of the Kahidi subdivision. So that's the intent of that provision. It was specific to providing security or entrance features, gates, et cetera, to the separate Kahidi neighborhood.
Go ahead.
Cap Purvis. Been on the board for 9 years, served with Ken. I have two, at one point in time I asked what commercial property was around the village. And I remember we pulled together a study. And I remember that piece of property entering into Kahidi on the right was shown as a commercial piece of property, but it was, I guess it wasn't explained that was not still Cooper-owned pieces of property. So I know that when we looked at the pieces of property that are going to be acquired as part of acquiring the developer rights, I thought that was still on the drawing that we saw, that we would acquire that piece of property vis-a-vis from Cooper. Not realizing, I guess, that Cooper had sold it sometime in the past, and therefore now I guess it's not part of that acquisition.
That's correct. Now, can I not to interrupt you, but I think we need to address something that's going on here. There's some issues about this is Kahidi, that's not Kahidi. There seems to be a thread on this YouTube that brings up, they're part of Tellico Village, and we're getting close to, in my opinion, on this YouTube chat, pitting a neighborhood against a neighborhood, and that's what, look folks, this is part of Tellico Village. There's a piece of property outside of one of our neighborhoods that we're discussing. It's got nothing to do with them against them, or we're doing it for this one or that one. This is a piece of property that could affect a neighborhood in Tellico Village. We would be having the exact same conversation if we were talking about a piece of property on Poplar Springs Road. So please, folks, don't go down that. That is not what we're discussing.
Pat,
and I know you're not. I just wanted to interrupt you.
I want to disagree with you. I knew the only reason I mentioned the word Kahidi to identify a location, not to get into i.e. neighborhood against neighborhood. Never mind. The other point I wanted to make, and I'm going to make this again in a few minutes here when we get around to approving the budget, we now have over $13 million in the bank. I remember when we were struggling to get $4 or $5 million. We were letting employees go, various situations like that. Never anticipated we would have this much money. What this strikes me as is now, boy, we got a lot of money. Let's go out and correct other issues around the village. We maybe never had the money in the bank because this land, I don't know how long ago, it got on the market. But this up 2-3 years ago because we didn't have the money. Now we have the money, we're bringing it up. I just feel that, like Ken said a few minutes ago, table the thing, study it, and fully understand what you're going to do with it when you acquire it. So it's a strategic acquisition for further development or use, not, hey, we're just going to buy property to buy property. Thank you.
Any
Cap,
other
I'm
comment
sorry.
from the?
I have to respond to that because I find that a little bit accusatory, and that is not the case at all. This property wasn't on the market 2 or 3 years ago. This property has recently come on the market in the past year, and it has, had some significant interest in it. In my opinion, because of its prominent location, it should be considered. So it's not like I looked and said, oh my goodness, we have, excess money laying around, we should spend it. That's not it at all. This is a protection of Tellico Village. This is a protection of property values. This is a buffer between what could be developed. This is potentially keeping something undesirable from being developed on that property. And so based on, now Winston was not here when the board discussed this in October. He was unable to be at that meeting. And so he has given us information about these other properties, which I agree, should they come on the market, should be considered. I mean, I think that that's important, not just those properties, but any key properties that come up, especially if they can serve a need by Tellico Village property owners. So what I would recommend at this point is, and you can tell me the proper procedure for this, but I would like to get with Winston and have a conversation, maybe include Beth and any other board members who are interested, and table this motion until the December meeting, and then figure out what we should do with it.
Then you need to make a tabling motion.
I would make a motion to table this discussion until the December meeting.
And I'll need a second. Okay, I've got a motion and a second for to table this discussion until December. Tabling motions do not require any discussion, so I will put it to an immediate vote. All in favor?
Wait a minute, I've got a comment on that before you vote.
I'm sorry?
I'd like a comment on the table.
You can't.
Well, then I'm gonna
Tabling
vote
motions
against it.
do not allow comment.
You gotta, okay. Well, then when we get to the.
You can bring your comment up after the vote.
Okay.
All in favor of the tabling motion? 7-0.
You got nesting effect here, because the next thing we're gonna do is vote on a budget which has this 175,000 in it.
Yeah, I'm aware of
So
that.
you're gonna approve it, and then you're gonna come back in December and discuss it?
But that doesn't mean we have to spend it just because it's in the budget.
No. Well, then I would recommend you put it below the line.
We can discuss that when we get to that part of the budget. So,
You got nesting effect. You just essentially said we're going to table it and not discuss it, but you are going to approve it when you get up here to the.
no,
budget.
actually, I think you've got a very good suggestion. We'll move it
Right.
below the line.
Right.
Okay. So the next agenda item is the Asian Carp Committee report. And Carla, you're still up.
I'm still on, okay. All right, so Asian carp update for today. So go ahead, Shannon, and move forward one slide. So in regard to Asian carp, what's happening in Tennessee? As we've talked about before, in 2020, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee established the Asian Carp Advisory Commission to study and provide advice regarding the best methods for mitigating the invasion of Asian carp into the state's lakes and river systems. And the Tennessee Wildlife Federation is working to keep this issue top of mind with our elected officials and government agencies. U.S. Representatives Tim Burchett and Chuck Fleischman have appointed staff members to proactively manage the Asian carp effort in the Upper Tennessee River Basin. I will tell you, both of those representatives have visited Tellico Village, Representative Burchett on more than one occasion, and they are very patient and kind to give us detailed updates about what's going on. They're very knowledgeable about the situation. They have appointed staff members in their offices strictly to proactively manage the Asian carp effort in the Upper Tennessee River Basin. So their reports remain optimistic. They still don't have any evidence of successful spawning since 2015 upstream of Kentucky Lake Barkley area, and they are beginning to attribute that through scientists at TVA and other agencies in the Asian Carp Commission that could likely be a result of the different types of dams in the deeper water in the Tennessee River than the Ohio River, which is where they came from in the first place to get into Kentucky Lake and Lake Barkley. So they remain optimistic that that we're going in the right direction with these efforts. I provided you some links on the next slide to Asian carp information. Those websites are very frequently updated. They will give you good updated information. The first one is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and they are the ones who have the authority to close locks and install barriers, and so they give great information on their website. The Fish and Wildlife Services is the next one. Both of those federal agencies are ones that you always want to include in any letters that you write and any correspondence regarding Asian carp and asking for action and for them to be proactive in keeping this invasive species out of our waterways. The next one is TVA, and then TWRA. The last one is a group that I find really fascinating to follow. It's congressionalsportsmen.org, and these are elected officials who actually are sportsmen, and they're this issue is very near and dear to their hearts, and they post some really great information on that website. And so I put the links on this slide just because if you're watching online or if you go back watch the video, you can see that, and also Beth will post them to the TVPOA website. Next slide, Shannon. So what we say every time we give an Asian carp update is keep those cards and letters coming, keep the pressure on those elected officials. And so we try to keep that updated information, and as I talked to you about in the September meeting, making sure that you always include the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Fish and Wildlife Services, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, because those are the two top federal agencies who have decision-making authority in this regard. And also, Representative Fleischman said be sure and include him on any of those letters because he serves on the Appropriations Committee, and as you know, that's where the money comes from. And so any of these kinds of barriers or any action that is taken requires money, and so we need that to keep coming. So, and you can also keep up to date by following those links on the previous slide. Next slide, Shannon. So this is from the Tennessee Wildlife Federation, and they're talking about the money that was appropriated. We talked about that in September, $25 million last year, this year, and $26 million next year. And then there's a link on that page right there. When you see this on the website too, follow that link because you can put your name and your email address, and there is a letter that by pressing submit will go out to all of those agencies. It's super easy. You don't have to load all of those email addresses into your email or anything. You can just, there's a letter template there, and you can just put your information in, and it will automatically send a correspondence to all of those agencies. So I think that's a really nice tool. And so I just reiterated the contact information that we talked about in September, mostly because I wanted it to be on the slide for your reference. If you look at it on the video, if you look at it on the website, that information is there, so you can write traditional letters to them. And as I said, you can also send emails to them by using that form on the previous slide to the Tennessee Wildlife Federation. So unless anybody has any questions, that's what I have for you today.
Any questions from the board? Questions from the audience? Mr. Hockey.
My name is Jim Hockey. A question, because I've been following this as well. Do you, Carla, or any of the committee know today's status of TVA's environmental assessment? Many of us sent in comments and all, but I can't find that it's ever been finalized.
If you follow that TVA link, that is the detail on that. It's got the NEPA reviews, it's got everything, and all the updated information is there.
I've done that, and near as I can figure out, it's never been finalized.
Well, you're probably right about that. It's moving at the speed of government. So that.
I'm just curious if you had any additional information.
I do
Okay,
not.
Thank you.
And Representative Fleischman did not when we met with him, but that was the end of August. So I know that there was another Asian Carp Commission report supposed to be delivered this fall, and I have looked high and low for that, and I cannot find the Asian Commission report either. So, but I have a great contact at TVA. I'll follow up with him and see if he's got an idea of where all that is.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments from the audience? Okay, with that, we'll move on to the finance update. Charlotte?
Mr. President, board, villagers, thank you for coming out. We'll go over.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll go over the key non-financial indicators first. The assessed lots actual 6,667 for an average monthly of 6,554. POA lots sold 281. There's an inventory of 288 lots. Head count, we're looking for 3 golf maintenance, 2 public works, 1 rec, 1 in water and sewer, 1 marketing manager, and 1 public works manager. Moving down to public works. Property transfers exceptionally well at 1,000, just over 1,000. We have new home permits, 323, with a current build of 319. Moving down to golf, that is going very well as mentioned, with almost 95,000 rounds. That's 5,000 over prior year and 25,000 over budget. Docks, pretty much 100% leased. We have a wait list of 182. RV, the wait list is 74. And the recreation membership going very strong with individuals at 577 and family memberships 857. Thank you. Before we get into the P&L, I wanted to mention the cash balance is $4.4 million. The reserve balance, $8.5 million, for a total of $12.9 million total cash and cash reserves. Revenue, $21 million. Expenses, $16 million. Net income, $5.4 million. That's $3.3 million over prior year and $5.3 million over budget. Moving on to the categories of revenue. Assessments continue to grow with the increased number of paying lots. The late fee shortfall in revenue is offset by the bad debt expense. Golf revenue going very strong as mentioned. We're 5,000 rounds over prior year, significantly over budget. Recreation memberships, once again, the current year-to-date average exceeds prior year. Installed tanks, we've got 5 tank jobs closed for the month of October. We are seeing some profit erosion due to increased material costs. Dock revenue is favorable, as well as RV. ACC permits are favorable against budget due to the higher new home permits. And other revenue is significantly higher due to the administrative service fees associated with the property transfers. And this is the trended revenue and expenses. Moving on to the expenses, maintenance, once again, favorable variance. There's a lot of things going on here, and I'll just start with the pavement preservation that is complete for the year, but it was due to the weather, it's 75% complete. There's the overlay with PRI, the Tokwa parking lot needs to be paved, and I think that's occurring this week. The water system improvement, funding will be submitted in December. The sewer system, they're working on the study. Water storage rehab is underway and will be completed by the end of the year. The dock anchor replacement is in process and should be completed by the end of the year. The wet well coating is on schedule to be completed by the end of the year, as well as the Chota sprinkler system. Salaries are favorable, primarily due to golf, $120,000, public works, $285,000, rec, $52,000, and admin, $32,000. Food service is once again going very strong. Water and sewer revenue continues to be favorable against budget. And other is favorable due to the gain on the sale of the lots, land lots.
Charlotte, before you go on,
Okay.
on maintenance, at $1.4 million, how much of that is a permanent savings versus a carry forward to the rest of this year and next year?
I'll have to get that for you, Steve.
So is it majority, do you know? My hunch is a majority of that is you're going to carry that over. It's work that's got to be done, you just didn't get to it.
Is Clayton? Okay.
Yes, a majority of that will be carryover, but all of it won't be, because all of it, we will not be using all of it. A lot of it was savings from where we changed from one pavement preservation to another, and our pavement overlay process
But
too.
let's assume it's $1 million you'll be carrying over. It's something you'll spend the rest of this year or next year covering it?
Yes.
So when we get the statements about all the cash you got, part of that's because you haven't spent it, but you will be spending it.
Yes.
Okay. And then next, thank you. When we go down to other, what'd you say that other was down there, Charlotte, where you've got actual of 467 and budget of 1.3?
Primarily due to the sale of land lots, $895,000.
You put that in expense as a credit.
That is where it's been previously.
And then one other thing that you can check that will not take any time today, but put it in your notes. On your balance sheet under inventories, I know you got clearing accounts. There's one that has a credit balance like of $270,000. I'm assuming that's a credit against your construction in progress account you're reclassing?
I will get that for you, Steve.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. This is the trended net income by month. And then special request by the Financial Accounting Committee for the separate or the divisional P&Ls for October year to date. Next slide, please. All right. Golf rounds, once again, as mentioned, very strong. Tokwa, almost 30,000 rounds. Tanasi, 27,000 rounds. And Kahidi, 22,000 rounds for total member rounds of 79,000. And guest rounds going strong with Tokwa 5,000, Tanasi 5,000, and Kahidi 5,600, for a total of 15,700 guest rounds. And then cart
May I
rounds.
ask a question?
Sure.
The guest rounds, and Chris, you can answer this one. Is that a record? The 15,700 guest rounds?
Sure it is.
Thought it might be. Good job.
Okay, and then we have final golf rounds. Tokwa, just under 30,000. Tanasi, 27,500. Kahidi, 23,000, for total cart rounds of 80,000, just over 80,000. And once again, total consolidated rounds, 94,912. So that's 5,000 over prior year and almost 25,000 over budget.
Charlotte? Have to bring it up because I always do. If you go back and take a look at we'll be talking about the membership fees for next year. And when I focus on that Twilight Annual, right now, the year-to-date through October, we've got 267 memberships. They've played 12,276 18-hole rounds. That means on average, that's 46 rounds. The break-even point this year was set, the pricing was set for greens fees at 29. So you've got 46 average, break-even 29. We'll see later that the budget for next year is a break-even of 33 rounds, greens fees only. So I'll save my ammo for that discussion later.
Thank you.
Okay, and as mentioned, household memberships going very strong. The average monthly is $857. That's exceeding prior year. And the individual average monthly, $577, 74 over prior year. Any other questions?
Any questions from the audience?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Charlotte. Kevin?
Thank you. I'll go through the report on current activities pretty quickly. I know a lot of people have talked about these extensively already multiple times. So 2022 budget process, hopefully we're in the final stretch here today. We talked about maintenance. Clayton and his team is completing as much maintenance work as possible with the weather and trade availability. Steve, you're right. If I were to take a guess, overall maintenance, it probably is close to $1 million that will need to be caught up. And I think Clayton's got some good plans with the PSAC on scheduling out all of that, so we do maintain the village the way that we need to. Chota water tank inspection was mentioned earlier. I think they're done with all the interior work of that tank repair. Timing of the outside, I think they can pressure wash and clean it up a little bit. As far as painting it, I think that's dependent upon the temperature that we have in the next month and a half. Asphalt work for Kahidi Trail is completed. Again, we talked about asphalt, a lot of weather dependency. Wave attenuator, I'd say that's about 98% complete. Clayton is holding the vendor to what he agreed to do on the work. There's just some very minor punch items that need to be finished up before Clayton signs off on the payment to the vendor. But I think everyone's been very pleased with how that new system is attenuating. Charlotte talked about the strong cash balances due partly due to higher revenue and then timing of maintenance completion. Certainly having close to $13 million in cash puts us in a good position going into what we'll talk about in the budget with some very uncertain economic times. And then Winston mentioned this earlier, we're finalizing work. It actually has been finalized. It's getting rolled out to the employees soon in a December open enrollment meeting. The 2022 employee health benefits, like I mentioned earlier, as in years past, when our benefit advisor goes out and tries to get bids on the different benefit packages for the employer and the employee, we initially saw ranges in the 40% increase. That came down more into the 20 to 23% range. We had 20% budgeted on the POA side, and the difference will be impacting for the first time in about 3 years on the employee side. So, we'll work through that. I think we've got a good communication plan taking into account, even though we've got a little over 100 employees, we're very much indicative of larger companies with incidents of disease and benefits. So I think overall, even though it's an increase, we could have fared much worse.
Kevin, just out of curiosity, what's the employee share percentage?
It's 83% employer and 17% employee. Okay, on the capital request, there really is one that requires board approval. The other two are more informational. The capital request is for the yacht club bar renovation, and it's to replace the bar and equipment in the dining level of the yacht club. Mitzi is the manager on that. We had $150,000 budgeted. The requested amount for the full project is $150,116. The source of funds would be out of the R&M Reserve Fund. The FAC did recommend this to move forward to the board last Friday. The project justification, Steve, I think you were in that kitchen and can attest to the woeful conditions there. So it's part of the renovation of the yacht club dining level kitchen and bar area. It's desperately needed. Rather than request individual components of the project, we're requesting the full amount. Before we get to a motion, Shannon, if you could go to the next slide, please. Here's a breakdown of what we know, and some of this, we have multiple quotes to support the different components of the project. As you can imagine, it's getting very difficult to get quotes in general, let alone getting vendors to lock down prices. And I could kind of talk through the major pieces of this. Obviously, a lot of it is tap towers, foot rails, beer systems, standard restaurant type equipment. You get into the larger modular bar system at $10,000. So the total bar equipment out of the 150 is roughly $58,000. We had discussed previously carpet, and that's a pretty solid quote that Beth gets from a local vendor of $8,800. New decor, that's more of a placeholder. Obviously, Beth is pretty frugal about how and where she decorates. The epoxy floor restoration of $55,000, that's a pretty firm number. We do have two quotes that support that. There's a lot that goes into leveling and proper pitch with drainage on those commercial floors. It's not just a case of pour leveler and you're good to go. Wallpaper removal and replacement for $12,000. Again, that's, depending on what we do, that's a pretty good quote from a local provider that Beth works with. And then demo cost, that's more of a placeholder. Obviously, Clayton and the building maintenance folks will try to assist and do as much as possible. But occasionally, during the demo, we need to bring in outside resources. So the total requested reno budget is just over $150,000, which is close to the budgeted amount. So there, I'm sorry, did someone have a question?
I did. For clarity.
Yes.
That says 2022 budget, that's 2021 budget.
It's a 20,
You're
I forgot
executing-
to fix that. Thank you, Bruce.
That's 2021
That is the
budget. You're
2021
executing it
budget.
because of lead time.
Pardon me?
You're executing it now because of lead time.
Correct.
Instead of doing it as carryover.
Correct.
Okay.
And I do,
It will be, but
so I've got 150,000 that was budgeted in 2021, which is why I'm requesting it now. You're correct. We could order this stuff now, and we're not going to get it for at least a couple months. I do have 160,000, so I've got a little extra room. In food service capital for next year, you'll see 160,000 of carryover, which is this kitchen renovation. There's also 170, not to get ahead of myself, but there's also 175,000 in food capital for next year related to the Kahidi expansion. So one thing that Beth, Andy, and Mitzi have been trying to work through is the timing of all of these improvements to our food facilities so as not to disturb, obviously, high golf season, what can we get done in the early spring, and what would need to get deferred into the fall. So you're technically correct on both fronts, Steve. It is a 21, it's got a 2022 carryover. But just like everything, we could defer this to 22, but then I'll just ask you again in January, and it'll take another month to order. Stuff is just taking way too long once you order, and I don't want to hold up that. So again, the request is to approve the capital funding for the Yacht Club Bar and Kitchen renovation for $150,116 from the R&M Reserve Fund.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the capital expenditure of $150,116 to renovate the bar and kitchen area on the dining level of the Yacht Club, funded from the R&M Reserve. Sue? Second? Bruce? Discussion?
Kevin, you did say you have multiple quotes for each of those line items, correct?
Not all of the line items, the major ones.
The major ones, okay.
Like the epoxy floor, the kitchen equipment, the, I think we do on the wallpaper removal replacement.
Okay. And then just in the future, when you put a project together, if you look at the title, the first thing you see is Yacht Club Bar Renovation. I see this more as a kitchen renovation from what I saw back there.
Yep.
Okay.
Other comments from the board? Comments from the audience? Okay, with that,
So, Rick, sorry, before we take a vote,
Didn't see you.
one of the things that we discussed in the Finance Committee meeting when we talked about this was, you know, if we have any expansion to the yacht club in the future, we kind of talked about that, and we've got a committee that's going to look at it next year, that these expenditures will not be throwaway. So I think that's very important that whatever we're talking about doing here has a life expectancy beyond if we decide to add on or push out the wall or whatever at the yacht club.
I have one question. Mitzi, how long will the yacht club be down?
As of right now, we're estimating 2 months.
2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All in favor? Passes 7-0.
Thank you.
will the bar area and the lower level be open during these 2 months?
Yeah, we need a bar to go to.
We'll see what we can arrange, Bruce.
Yeah, okay.
I do have online sales as well.
There you go.
Delivery available upon request.
But I need a bartender.
So what you're saying, though, is the kitchen area will be the biggest impact during those 2 months?
Why?
Okay, the next two are informational. Public Works, as you know, have been working on a sign shop to bring sign making in-house. This is a vinyl printer for that shop. The budgeted amount in maintenance expense was $16,000. The requested amount is $13,565. Source of funds would be operating cash. The FAC did recommend this, even though they didn't have to. Obviously, the bid is from Grimco. And again, it brings in the sign making in-house to avoid reliance on outside vendors. No board action is required. It's within budget and within CEO approval authority. Second one, next one, please, Shannon. Next one is a roller press for the sign shop. And again, that just takes the metal blank and will apply the vinyl skin to that and then roll that out in a manner that will work and last. The budgeted amount was $2,435. The requested amount is $5,103. Again, it's operating cash. The bid is from Highway Handyman. And again, it's been previously approved within the CEO's approval authority.
I have a question or a comment.
Yes, sir.
And it might be to Clayton, but it's just a general life observation here. If you go back up to the first one, it's 16,000. You're requesting 13,565 for vinyl printer for sign shop. And it immediately hit me. And I heard this in the finance meeting the other day and didn't pay a lot of attention until just now. So I guess Clayton would have to answer this. Are you going through a training process on this? Because the cost of the vinyl is going to be one of your highest costs. And Steve and a couple other people here know what I do for a hobby. And what I found learning to do a new process, typically the application of a veneer or this vinyl or glue or whatever it is the most expensive part of the whole process. And you tend to burn a lot of material learning how to do it properly. And I know, knowing you and knowing your staff, you're not going to put stop signs out or road signs out or yield or anything with a big air bubble behind it. You know, it's not good. So you got to learn how to put it on without that air bubble, without it hanging off the side, centered up. Is there a plan in place, or do you have in this money an allocation for the training to get good at this?
Yes, Pat. The reason we went with this equipment, and we've been in 10 sign shops around East Tennessee looking at the equipment that they use to make signs, and we chose to go this route. It's a vinyl printing instead of doing multiple layers, and this company does offer training with that. That's training included in that price. They will, when we get all our equipment in, they will come in, help us set that equipment up and train.
I would strongly, and again, pointing back to Steve because he's seen some of this stuff, I would strongly recommend you doing this, and do not let them tell you you do 1 and 2 and 3, push the button and 4 comes out and you're okay. Do not do that because they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that little demonstration, you go, hey, that's easy. And then you walk off and try to do it yourself. It's a different world. Right, Steve?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. They've assured me they will not leave until we're comfortable.
Good. So your idea, your words, don't get comfortable.
Yeah. Gotcha. Gotcha.
Right?
Yes.
Until you've got an expert.
Yes. We're going to make sure we're putting out quality signs.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Next slide, please, Shannon. Next. There you go. Apologize for the eye chart, but when we start getting at the end of the year and kind of wrapping up capital, the lists get pretty long. So what's been added to this from the previous month, you'll see the last 2 items at the bottom. The Yacht Club Bar and Kitchen renovation for $150,116. And then I combined the Public Works sign shop equipment, printer and roller for just under $20,000. So the projects approved to date have been $2,993,000 versus a budget of $2,838,000. And again, this is another misnomer here. The capital remaining to be authorized just from the budget was $831,000, and I covered at previous board meetings, the majority of that is not going to be requested. So I talked about what is carried over. It's 300,000 of the water system improvements that PSAC's working on. So next year, we've got a total of 600,000. And then 175,000 for, or I'm sorry, the 160 that I just talked about. But any questions on the capital to date?
I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned last month, I have in the October board packet, the capital remaining to be requested, and in that list included the Kahiti Pier and the Kahiti boat launch. I think we all know that's not going to be requested before the end of the
Correct.
year. I don't believe we have a placeholder in the budget for that in the future. I'd like to see that put somewhere below the line, out years, something,
It's not 40,000.
so that we don't forget about it.
Well, I guess I'd submit to you that you need to tell us what you want to put in as placeholder, because the parking lot alone was 90.
Well, the parking lot is not part of that.
Yeah, the turnaround zone in the parking area is.
Oh, the turnaround for the pier. I thought you were
Yeah.
talking about the road and the parking lot, the current one. Okay.
Well, plus, you know,
I
if you've
will-
got boat trailers, you're going to have
I will tell you that when we
different
talk
parking.
about the budget.
Okay. Finally, the cash flow check, obviously, net income, we had budgeted 500,000. Year-to-date variance that Charlotte talked about, 5.2 million. So the projection would be 5.8. Depreciation, we're running obviously a little favorable due to timing of CapEx. The CapEx, I just talked about, the year-to-date unfavorable of 154,000 for a total of 3.8 million as a projection. And then net cash flow, we had budgeted using $1.2 million in net cash flow, and we are projected to be positive 3.788 million. And like Steve said before, in that net income is the maintenance line item, which has $1 million plus of timing. Next slide, please. Okay. Yes, sir.
Does anybody have any questions for Kevin about the material he's just gone over? Okay, with that, we'll move on to the budget.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Shannon. So I thought a lot of this we've reviewed at many of our different budget meetings. I want to walk the board through changes from the November 3rd board review. I've got a full income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, capital, reserves, debt, headcount, rates, key non-financial indicators, and then for informational purposes, appendices and some additional analysis that the board had requested. Next slide, please, Shannon. So changes from the last board review. We did increase the rec memberships, individual and household, to reflect the proper jump-off point. Steve, I think you were involved in that review with the rec advisory committees. That increased revenue for rec by 18,000. We did lower back to the original green fees. We did lower the golf unlimited twilight green fees back to 594. So that decreased our revenue 29,000. And then Mitzi and I believe she worked with Andy as well, we did add in additional food service capital for 2025 through 32, as it was noted that we were a little light in the out years.
So question for you. In the last meeting, I brought up the point that we had zero funds for additional parking, either at Tanasi, the yacht club, and we had decided that we should put some engineering. I believe we said 40,000. was what my memory said, because the point was our current 10-year plan had $0 for parking. So what we're effectively telling the property owners, there will be no more parking. In a month, and in that last meeting, we said we need to put something in there because we're going to have to address parking. Shuttle service is not the answer. So if that's not in there, that's another tweak on the amendment for the budget.
Okay. Yeah, I would have to go look, Steve. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure on that one. Okay, from a consolidated net income, this is the change from the November 3rd, which is on the right. We were at net income of $2,248,541, and currently we're at $2,237,673. So the changes are basically what I had noted previously. And again, you know, assessments were up to almost 12.6 million, water and sewer, installed tanks, et cetera. So, next slide, please. If you look at our draft 2022 budget, you'll see that in comparison to the 2021 budget and 2020 actuals year to date. It's more indicative of kind of where we're at in 2020. But again, Winston asked this the other day, I don't think we've ever projected to be this strong on a net income side. And I will tell you, even though that does look obviously very healthy financially, that net income will remain, and it flows through not operating cash, but in reserves. So I just want to point that out. It's kind of like equity on the balance sheet. Really, the only way to do it is to produce net income. So, next slide. So by division, and again, I have some additional slides. I think a better way to look at this, even though everyone kind of has in their head subsidy means positive net income, a better way to look at it is really the cash requirements of every single department. So that's really net income, adding back in depreciation, which is a non-cash adjustment. Any other non-cash adjustments need to come out or in, and then any capital requirements for that business. But again, obviously, you know, admin looks favorable because of the assessment sitting in there. Utilities, that is not just water and sewer. That is all public service. Golf, we talked about the improvement year over year there, improvement in rec, improvement in food service, improvement in docks. So I think our assumptions, I don't think they're overly aggressive, but I do think they're indicative of where we're finishing this year, and hopefully, you know, that'll continue. Next slide, please. I put together the famous pie chart that has been around for probably 15 years. I did look at the last 4 years to see, to make sure that my graph skills were still up to par. And some big changes to note over previous years. Obviously, the proposed monthly assessment is $153.85. What's interesting to note, debt payments to principal is obviously becoming a lesser amount in the 2022 budget for, since we paid off the Tokwa Clubhouse debt. Now, with that being said, all of these slides do not include the strategic investment. So in the December board meeting, I'll be presenting, and hopefully the board will be approving the rolling in of, you know, $4 million of debt. So this will change, obviously, to reflect that. But it was just interesting to note. And then, obviously, capital, which is just to the left, that wedge is for all the different businesses, And again, I think a better way to look at it is by department, not just aggregating capital together. Food, we talked about the strong performance on the food side. They're becoming financially better and better every year. As Charlotte talked about in the yacht club subsidy in particular, just an outstanding year. Public Works continues to be a large component of where the assessments go, as it should be, and mostly tied to maintenance and infrastructure improvements for next year. Fitness, golf, those all continue to be strong. Beth has really kind of held her marketing goals consistent with prior years. So as overall revenue and assessments grow, marketing becomes a smaller and smaller part of that whole pie. And then obviously TRDA interest lingers out there for us all. So,
Kevin, just repeat what you said about the capital slice, which shows what, 2688? In reality, when people look at this, you look at property owners look at the amount of subsidy for the amenities. You have to take the slice that you have it, and then there's a piece of that 26 that also flows to each amenity: rec, golf, food, you name it.
Correct.
And the other thing is the significant improvement in the food service, not only the subsidy here at the yacht club, but the great performance coming out of the Kahiti Bar and Grill.
Yep.
Great turnaround there.
Correct. Next slide, please, Shannon. I know this is another finance eye chart here, but I did put together the divisional cash requirements, so that cash flow approach for each of the different departments, what their user fees are, and then basically calculate a percentage of spending covered by user fees. And, as you would expect, we're becoming less and less dependent upon user fees or on assessments, the more user fees get supported in the village. I did talk to Mitzi about food service. You would look at that and go, oh, well, that looks horrible. But the thing to note with food, and we've talked about this many times, we have at least three different food service models that we operate financially in the village. So capital, we've always had historically, the POA would pay for capital that in theory AWE gets to enjoy the use of. And the thought being is if anything ever changed with that vendor, we don't want them ripping out assets out of the kitchen because we would need to replace the vendor. So we tend to buy capital for all of food. So even though the revenue and the analysis shows basically what runs through our P&L, Kahiti, she's burdened with, not burdened, but she's accounting for capital requirements for 4 different restaurants.
Yeah, I asked Kevin to put this chart together just so we take a look at what's the total cash requirements for each amenity and what % of that cash requirement is paid for by user fees. So you can just take a look by what's broken down by our major amenities, which is basically taking that slice of the pie that's capital and putting it against each amenity. So thanks for putting this together.
Yep. And we could start reporting on this regularly. I think it's helpful. I would love to slowly get away from that pie graph, as I think it's somewhat misleading, but I didn't want to not do it this year, just so folks, understand, how things have been changed. Next slide, please, Shannon. So on the balance sheet, obviously we'll continue to update the balance sheet through 12/31, which is not that far away. Again, the strong cash balances will be reflected. It's really the third column in, which is the budget 2022. Large things to note, you'll see a change in our methodology really for reserves. We talked about this, of having a water and sewer reserve, as in the past, since it's funded from water and sewer usage. and then shift to a current year capital and maintenance reserve of 3.7 million. And then long-term reserve, which is where all the remaining net income would resolve. That's really a do not touch reserve. We can refine that with reserve study and further analysis as we continue to change our asset base. And then the piece that would be in here and needs to be added is the future amenities, and have a reserve for savings for what would line up with the long-range plan and the village needs. The rest are pretty standard, and obviously what I look at is our reserve targets, making sure that we hit that. So next slide, please.
Kevin, before you move on.
Yep.
If you focus on your total cash line, forecasted year end this year, 12.3 million.
Yep.
With all the budgets and the proposed increase in the POA fees and all the other fees, our cash balances basically stay flat, 12.3. So there is no significant build in cash. And then to piggyback on your last comment, this 11-year plan shows $0 accumulated for any new amenities. So if the long-term plan says we're going to have some new amenities, you got to figure out a way to fund it, which I would propose is when you look at the cash balances, when you go past 2023, you start growing it. So you've got that piece, and then we'll have the results of the reserve fund study next year to tell us what should the target be, because right now it's a guess.
So then what I'm hearing on top of that's what we talked about last time, and I think we talked about at the finance meeting, is that if there are no new amenities, where's the money going? It's going into maintenance.
Maintenance reserves, replacements,
It's
right.
going into reserves, keep us from going into debt. So
Correct.
there's nothing new in this budget other than, I'll make a point here, other than a Kahiti dock. Everything else is a replacement of some old something or maintenance or fix up or keep ourselves out of debt. So it boils down to, like I asked myself, what do I want to give up? That's what it boils down to. You got to give up something in order to keep the cost down. Now, you can also say, I can give up employees, but we're down 9 now. Or I can give up pay raises. So we're down 9 employees. We can't get it. We had to go up in rates this year, and we've also had to pay bonuses just to remain 9 short people.
Well, they're not bonuses, they're equity adjustments.
Well, equity adjustments, yeah. But we've had to pay to hire some folks as well.
Absolutely. I mean, labor shortages are kind of a thing we're going to deal with for a while.
We also knew that we were going to have a plastic shortage. And if you heard in the award ceremony the other day, one of the MAC advisory committee members had talked to that guy, and we bought that big plastic wave attenuator prior to the plastic prices going out and stored it on site for almost 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so the other thing is, if it wasn't obvious from what Steve was saying, the fact that we don't have anything in the plan for amenities for the next 10 years is probably unreasonable. Right. So we need to be plugging something in there which is going to impact that bottom line cash number.
If you want. If you don't, then you shouldn't put the money in there. You shouldn't pay the assessment fee increase. You shouldn't go along with it. You should fight it tooth and nail, because one of these days, you're going to say, I want, and it's not going to be there.
Right. And that's what we're challenging the long-range planning committee with as well, is that where should we be putting money in the 10-year plan for amenities?
Right, because there is nothing new in this budget.
Nothing.
Well, there's 2 philosophies regarding future amenities. Who pays for it? Do we pay for it and not enjoy it? Or do we wait and finance it so that the people that are enjoying it pays for it? So just don't get the idea that you need to put it in here so you can pay cash for it. You have to have a philosophy about who's paying for it and who's using it and who's paying for it.
Oh, I agree with that, Bruce, but I also think that good planning, you'll put something in your plan for
No doubt.
amenities, and we have nothing today.
No doubt, but also when you're in there, before you just stick in the budget, you might say, okay, we'll put it out there and we're gonna pay 25% of it out of reserves, because generally speaking, we would have to if we get a loan. But then you would also, in your budget and out years, put your, the amount of money that you owe in loans in the budget. So.
Okay. Next slide, please. So on the cash flow statement, if you look at the third column, obviously the excess of revenue over expense, our net income of $2,237,680. You got provision for bad debts, some small adjustments. You add back in $1,774,000 of depreciation, changes in working capital, and then investing activities. You'll see there the $3,940,000, call it $949,000 of capital expenditures, which I think for us is on the high side when it wasn't a build a clubhouse year. But again, you'll see, so it's roughly equal, the cash coming in, cash going out for capital, assuming that everything gets spent in the same year. Next slide, please, Shannon.
Before you go,
Oh, sorry.
if we just take a look at your cash provided by operations from 22, 23, 24, 25, it's pretty flat. What's going to drive the change in cash, which is down 3 lines from the bottom, you can see in 2022 with all the assumptions you've rolled through, with the 200 adjustments and calculations you've made over the last 4 months, cash is going to change by about $62,000 on a budget where you're spending well over $25 million a year. So things are pretty constant.
Yes. Where that capital for 2022 and beyond is really going to, obviously administration, we talked about that as a couple items, and we've got detail on that. 200,000 of that is the replacement of the accounting system. 175,000 is what I termed future strategic investment. Now, the earlier conversation that the board just had regarding the Kahiti parcel that was tabled, that is where that line item is flowing through. And I believe the wording does not give reference to that. So if it's a future strategic investment, I would suggest that it get left in as a placeholder for that future analysis of land needs.
I would suggest you put that below the line.
I call it future strategic investments. I'll get to it in a couple. Actually, Shannon, if you want to go to the next slide. So it's that 175,000 right at the top in admin. Obviously, golf, there's the, sorry.
So what have we decided? Are we going to move that below the line?
I'm okay with leaving it right where it's at, because all projects that you approve in this budget don't get spent until you request authorization to spend it.
Yeah, I understand that.
Leave it in the budget.
Is everybody else okay with that?
I'm not.
I make a motion to leave the 175 in the budget for 2022.
I make a motion to move it below the line.
Hold it, we got competing motions. Hold it. So I'm just going to look for a consensus on this rather than have the dueling motions. Is there anybody that would object to leaving it in the budget the way it is now? Bruce, you can raise your hand.
I object to it, yes.
Okay. And do the other board members feel that it should stay where it is?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, then you ought to put a whole lot more in there, that things that people want.
We're just talking about one thing.
Yeah, but I could come up with a laundry list of things that I'd like to have,
But it's not
and
in
you
the
put it in there, and then we'll take it up when we vote next year.
Okay.
That's not the way you do budgets, people.
Okay, on the golf maintenance front, most of their capital needs right now relate to minor equipment replacement. Next slide, please, Shannon. Same with Tenassi. You'll see at Kahidi, the big item there is the $300,000 related to finishing the Kahidi bunker renovation. Next slide, please, Shannon. On the Tokwa Pro Shop with golf, if you recall, we've got $750,000 in 2023 below the line for Tokwa practice facility. We've got, I'm trying to think of other items that we've talked about. Rec, there's conversion of the back patio designed for this year, money in the budget next year, replacement of cardio equipment. We do have in the Chota Fitness Center, $51,000 for redesign of the racquetball court for spin room and functional training. We do have $25,000 in here for Chota Center evaluation for future. In Kahidi, there's capital for Kahidi fitness expansion. And moving on down, next slide, please, Shannon. Here's where a lot of the capital for this year is coming through is public service, water and sewer department. You'll see the $400,000 for sewer system emergency remediation. There is $300,000 related to water system improvements for this year and $300,000 in water system improvements carryover from 2021. So $1.4 million in water and sewer. And then obviously the remainder of public works. Next slide, please, Shannon. Our typical small equipment replacements. And then on food service, you've got $175,000 for Kahidi Kitchen expansion placeholder that we talked about. We've got the 150 yacht club renovation carry, or 160,000 yacht club renovation carryover. And then on docks, we've got continued dock expansion for many of the years out for a total capital of $3,949,000. Any question on capital? All right, next slide, please. So on the reserve front, we talked about having the beginning balance of current year capital and maintenance reserves of 3.7. What gets transferred into that account is basically the capital and maintenance projects for the current year, gets spent out, and leaves you with an ending balance of 3.7. So that 3.7 continues to stay in there. Obviously, that will get adjusted in the out years as we do further analysis. Water and sewer reserve fund starts at 2.6 million and then ends at just under 2. So it's a slight draw on the water and sewer. Next year, we've got a lot of work to do, looking at our whole water and sewer system rates and try to build a rate structure that makes sense for irrigation, incentives for using less water, et cetera. And then obviously the long-term capital reserve would have a beginning balance of 3.3 and then transfer out to the current year and then transfers in from excess cash flow.
What's that reclass cash?
Charlotte, do you remember what that is?
Isn't that where you bring down your excess cash from operating and bring it down to reserves because you're shooting for a target of $1.5 million or whatever it is in your operating cash?
Yeah, it's 2.5, but yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So again, what's important to note on the reserves, we really hit kind of the preliminary target for reserves by the end of 2023. And you know, there's a lot that can change from now until the end of 2023, but I think it's indicative of our improved financial performance. It's in line with the overall strategy that has been in place for the last few years from when the clubhouses got approved. It was the intent to build up those reserves to a level that makes sense for the future.
And we'll have a number that ties to a standardized, methodical method for the reserve study next year. So we'll have better targets justified by a detailed analysis.
Correct. Next slide, please, Shannon. Here's our existing debt schedules for 2022 and beyond. Obviously, Wellness Center got paid off. Welcome Center, there's a small amount outstanding, and right now it doesn't really make sense to go after that yet. Summit Medical Building, that debt continues through mid-2027. That debt is really offset by the long-term lease from Summit Medical. When that's done, that will just be pure free cash flow from that lease. And then TRDA lease, capital lease, obviously that continues for quite some time. And as I mentioned before, it excludes the Cooper debt, so you'll see that separately. Next slide, please. So on the head count, obviously on the admin line, there's 2 new head counts. One is a partial year for CEO replacement. One additional staff accountant related to the new system work. Obviously, Public Works, we talked about and justified in our budget meetings, bringing some of the water and sewer in-house with an equipment operator. In the Capitol, there was a backhoe, and then a technician, and then 1 maintenance person. So again, I think for the most part, you know, folks were pretty conservative about new staff, but as it was mentioned, this year in particular, we did have quite a bit flowing through our P&L for staff increases. We built a standard 3% merit increase. We did put in additional funds for equity adjustments for staff. Winston has been sharing for quite some time information from other POAs similar to us, and I think we are probably on the low side. Most folks seem to be doing around 5 to 10%, but obviously we'll continue to adjust as we need to and go from there. And then on the inflation side, we've got the board, you had me put in some additional 1% inflation to take us to 5.5% inflation. I'm hoping we get to 5.5% inflation next year, but right now it's, who knows. But every 1% miss in that inflation number means about $163,000 in expense for us in our P&L. So again, there's a lot of uncertainty.
Well, based on what I've just seen, October came in at 6.2%, which is a 30-year high, and the last 5 months have averaged 5.
Yep.
It's not a pretty picture.
Hang on.
Okay, next slide, please, Shannon. So here's a summary of the rates, assessments. Right now, we've got a 5% increase. If you remember in our previous budget discussions, this was the first time with a trailing 12-month inflation that we could have gone up 5.4% based on the Department of Labor statistics. Golf, Chris and the Golf Advisory Committee proposed basically a 3% effective increase. It's mostly coming through in cart fees, which align with the higher capital required for the new golf carts. And I think overall, still a strong value for members. Fitness is a 4% increase in rate. And Simon did point out to me over lunch that obviously he's picking up a couple percentage points in membership. So overall, from a top-line perspective, he's more in the 6-7%, but a rate increase of 4%. We talked about a 3% increase in the docks. For RV storage, let me back up there. On personal watercraft, a 0% increase. And then for kayaks, a 50% decrease from $400 down to $200, more in line with market conditions with kayak storage.
And actually, you need to change that wording because that's not a 50% reduction. If you go a true 50% reduction, it's going to be less than $200. So you need to change from the current fee to $200, which is what the market analysis shows.
Okay, thanks, Ben. RV storage.
I'm sure they'd love to pay less than $200, but, you know, for technical reasons.
RV storage secured, holding it flat to this year, same with unsecured. Water and sewer rates, a 0% increase. And again, a lot of work needs to be done next year on the water and sewer rates. I will let you know, because Winston had forwarded on to me, the notice from LUB. Per our new agreement with LUB, their water rates went up currently at the start of their construction, and then they go up whenever they finish construction. So in the budget right now, I've got that rate going up to do $2.30 for 1,000 gallons effective mid-year. So some of that depends on how fast. They haven't even broken ground on the site yet. I think they've got a few ribbons out there, but whenever they can get that project complete. But I just wanted you to be aware that even with holding those rates flat, we do have the higher cost structure taken into account in the budget. And then for water and sewer connection fees, 5% increase. And then on the water connection fee, we added in $300 per connection for the smart meters, which I think will, I don't want to say be a crowd pleaser, but I think there's a lot of benefits to the technology that's available on the water meters. 5% increase on the sewer connection, and we did do I provided the board, it's the next slide, I'll get to a tank installation, a 10% increase as well. Next slide. And to give the board the perspective, last time I presented what a market comparison would look like for fees, and obviously to still build in the village right now, even under the 2022 proposed rates, is still a value relative to our competitors. Next slide. Just some key non-financial indicators. I'll won't spend a lot of time on that. We've talked through it a lot with discussions previously. Next slide, Shannon. Don't want to get into a lot of discussion here. I did update.
You go back.
Yes, sir.
So I'm looking at the rec memberships, individual and family, and are those averages for the year?
Yes.
Okay. Because that's not going to be your entry point, right?
No, no.
Got it.
Kevin.
Yes, sir.
What did you put in for the AWE Yacht Club subsidy next year in this? Because I couldn't see it in the details.
0.
Okay, so right now we're at a $100,000 gain. We're going to lose 2 months because of the renovation, so you got it at 0. Okay?
Yep. I did go back to 2016. Kendra, the previous controller many years ago, she had done an analysis. Cap, I think you had brought it up. I did update that analysis based on 2017 through 2021. And it is very similar to what we had talked about in the cash requirements. It looks at net income, depreciation as an add back. In Kendra's analysis, she allocated 10% of the TRDA lease to docks to reflect their portion. Obviously, that becomes flat at $40,000 a year under the new TRDA lease arrangement. And then it takes the cost of capital for common docks, which is coming out of our fixed asset system. So cumulatively, there's been, $2,931,000 of CapEx related to docks. So they still are favorable, but again, from a cash requirement, it's not just about the cumulative net income for an area. Next slide, please, Shannon, or next two. That just includes common docks and gas docks. So the proposed board motions, Rick, do you want me to?
I'll run through them.
Yes, sir.
Before we go to the board motions, because each one will have to be moved, seconded, and voted individually, I'm going to throw it open for audience comments. Yes.
I'm going to tilt at this windmill one more time. And I heard Steve.
Thank you, Don Quixote.
Huh? Hey, it just shows that I keep hitting my head against the wall. I'm persistent, if not smart. Basically, looking back, and I understand what Steve keeps saying about the $1 million carryover. So that way, if you take the ending cash balance of 13 million or 12,000,009, take that million out, now you're at 11,000,009. When we set, and it keeps bringing up to me, when I sat on the board, I voted for a 5% increase out through these years, this current year included. What I had said at that time, the 5% was to get us to a reserve of $9 million. What I'm looking at now, you're projecting having a reserve balance of 9.8 million out there, so you've overshot the 9 million. I understand, Steve, we don't have a nice analysis to back up whether it's 9, 10, or 12 million. But I think a lot of that is, people make, at least from what I've read about reserve studies, they make the assumption you're going to replace something in kind, not necessarily, hopefully, continue to maintain it and upgrade it as needed, not replace it. So my only point I'm trying to make here with my suggestion of 4 million or 4% is that we keep telling people we're trying to get things under control. We've done a very good job of that. Let's send a signal, and perception is truth, that we can do a 4% and still hit these numbers, approximately going to be the same, but you'll be sending a signal out to the residents that it's not a 5% ad infinitum in perpetuity. That's all I'm suggesting. I know it won't make that much of an impact in the dollars of what Kevin's just done an excellent job of presenting, but it would send a signal that it's not 5% in perpetuity. And I hear what Marty is saying about, we do need to put something in, but then that sort of says, hey, we're going to build something no matter, we don't know what it is yet, and the long-range plan is being analyzed right now. It's going to come forward here, hopefully by the end of the year, and then maybe you'll have an understanding as, do we need another building? I know that there's parking that we needed, and you got the 40,000. I know that parking was studied by Jeff a number of years ago. I'm sure Winston's familiar. There's another level in front of the yacht club at that time we had identified that could be, in fact, bulldozed and paved for additional parking. We now are going to own the land that Cooper, that we never owned, for parking on the other side down by the docks. Now we're going to own that. So I think there's a lot of things yet to come forward, but I would just like to send a signal that we're not going to do this thing 5% in perpetuity. You guys have got 5% up there. It's included in all these numbers, but I just figured I'd give it one last shot. Thank you.
Thank you, Cap. Other comments? Ooh, interesting. I expected more.
I have a comment.
Okay.
I have a comment.
Yes?
I do.
You certainly may have one.
Okay. I have a problem a little bit like Cap does with the 5%. I don't like the idea that we're hanging our 5% increase in assessments on the inflation rate. I could understand that if we do use that we use the current inflation rate when we project expenses, right? Okay, I understand we should use even 6.2 or whatever it is. We should use the most current number that we have. But using that recommended percentage to determine what our increase in assessment ought to be, I think we also should then also take in consideration how much more profit that we're making or revenue that we're making when you make that decision on what the increase will be. You shouldn't just use the fact that inflation is 6% and say then automatically we ought to do a 5% or whatever we could do. So you ought to take both into consideration. And because of the fact that our revenue is growing substantially, even with us spending a whole lot of money for what some people would consider to be wants versus needs, we just should not bank that 5% or hang that 5% increase in assessment on the projected inflation rate. You got to take the fact that we're selling lots like crazy and getting more revenue in that doesn't have necessarily an effect on the infrastructure or things. It's just saying we're going up 5% because inflation is greater than 5%. We shouldn't do that. Just keep that in mind. We shouldn't do it.
Bruce, the one comment I want to make to everyone about the 5%, the assumption in the out years is consistent with what it was previously approved by the board, and that 5% continues through, I believe, 2025, 24.
Well, I don't. But I think when we...
Then it drops down to 4%. It's not like a
I'm just saying,
morphine
even
drip
when you go next year or when you get to 24, just don't take the fact that inflation's greater than 5%, therefore we should have... Don't tie that increase in assessment to just inflation. You got to take into consideration how much money you got, because at some point in time, we cease to be a nonprofit organization. We become a profit making. We're making money every year. So be careful. That's all I'm saying is be careful on the rates you're going, because at some point in time, you shouldn't have to continue to make money because you're going to have all the reserves you need. And then some point in time, you may even start having to give rebates.
Well, the other thing, though, I think until we have a firm number that everyone can be in agreement on reserves, it'd be prudent to continue to try to fund that reserve number until we know.
Well, you can do that multiple ways. You can do that by increasing the assessments continually, or you can also tighten your belt.
True.
And we don't do a good job of tightening our belt.
And we've got the long-range planning, which will,
$3.9 million.
you know, say what future amenities need to be saved for. And I will tell you, the other piece that needs to be factored is, at some point, we're going to reach an inflection point of reaching build-out, and you won't have the gains on the POA lot sales. You know, there's a lot of revenue stream that kind of dries up once build-out happens, so.
Our justification to the people that say that we hit them with a 5% increase every year because inflation, that's not true. That is misguidance.
Yeah, that's not why we did it.
Okay, and then the other thing is that...
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. The other thing is that we need to let the people know that it's not a guaranteed thing, that we actually do go through analysis every time, and we're trying to get our reserve balances, and it's not tied to inflation. Just remember that, please.
Yep.
And to the point, and I tend to bring this up, and I know I'll get negative feedback, and that's okay, but I'm watching the numbers here. We're averaging on every one of these meetings we've had since August. Most of the time, they're 2 meetings, finance advisory, this on a Zoom, and a board meeting. We've averaged somewhere between 20 and 30, averages about 25. It's running 20 right now. And in the audience, we run anywhere from 2 people that are not on advisory committee to 7, which is today. That people aren't on an advisory committee and have a dog in this hunt. If you then go back and look since August, you look at since August at the YouTube videos, it's rare that you will see even the one in August slightly above 100 historical views. So the people aren't watching this, but as soon as this board says 5%, you're going to hear an outcry like you've never heard before. And here's the point that I made earlier, and I'm making it again. We can't get the employees. We had to raise the starting and comparable wage rates. We had to pay bonuses. We've had increasing fuel costs that are really ripping into businesses all around here. Our equipment costs have risen, and in a lot of cases are to the point that we can't get equipment, and to get it, we have to pay way over a premium price to keep this thing going. We've had POA staff, advisory committees, and board been working on this since August. The numbers show, which I mentioned, 7 in here, 25 people watching, over 100. And the challenge that I'm making to all of these people that are going to have an opinion in just a few minutes is take, and I'm not going to show you, this is just today. And I've got a briefcase full and it's getting hard. And every one of them is at least twice this thick, twice a month to go through this since August. Go back, and they're all on the webpage, they're all on video. Go back and find me the number that you can take out to reduce it to 4. Because I will never be a board member to sit on this board and go, 4% is a good number. And that's what people are saying. Why can't it just be 4? Show me what the number should be, and I will vote for that number. That number right now is to cover the expenses that we have. Not including true. A dog. What is it? That's what is the truth?
That is not true.
Hang on.
What is the truth?
Hang on.
I'm done.
At one time, we were going through a budget process where we basically laid out our expenses, quote, what it takes to run this village, correct?
Right.
And we weren't going to put in there an assessment increase or anything, just tell me. Then we were going to say, what is our anticipated revenue without an increase? And I would bet you $1 to a donut that if you went through and did that analysis like that, you wouldn't need the 4%. Because basically the revenue that we're getting from the sales and the additional assessments from those sales more than covers our expenses.
But what about the reserves?
Well, again, yes, you do need the reserve, but at how fast do you need to grow these reserves? We have grown the reserve since we built TOPA. We've built it back up to $9 million almost, right? So how fast do you need to grow it? Do you need to grow it to the point where you have to have 5% every year? I'm not sure we do. I don't know that we've done that analysis.
So if you don't...
I'm not arguing that we need adequate reserves, and I've even given up on the idea that we don't need a study. I'll buy your study.
Well, since you won't be here to vote on it next year.
I'll buy your idea that we need, but at the same time that you're preaching that we need a study to do, we ought to say, we ought to be controlling our appetite so that we can get to that number that you predicted. So I don't even think, probably, haven't done the math, but I ask you, have we done the math to the point where we actually feel like we need an increase in assessments? I don't know that we have.
Carla, did you have something?
I do. Well, this is what I think we have. Right now, we have a lot of contingencies that are in the works, right? So we don't have the results of the reserve fund study, so we kind of picked an educated guess and said, we at least want to do this until we get those results, right? We don't have the land use map that the Long Range Planning Advisory Committee is working on of how, you know, there's going to be an assignment of expected use for every part of land in Tellico Village. We don't have that yet. That's a contingency for how that's going to go. We also don't have from Long Range Planning future amenity needs that will come from obviously the recent growth that we've experienced. So to me, I think it's wise to, you know, do exactly continue down the path that we've been going down, which is to build these reserve funds to the point where we will have what we need to serve the people of this village well. And so because we have so many, you know, slightly unknowns, I mean, we can make educated guesses, but until we actually get the results from these studies and from these maps and from these amenity needs, I just feel like we need to go down this path to make sure that we're taking care of the future of the village.
One or two other points. If you take a look at the boon we've seen the last 2 years, this year we're going to bring in over $1 million in ACC fees and other fees for all the houses we're permitting. That's going to dry up, number one. Number two, eventually you get the build out, and your only source besides user fees are POA assessments. And at some point, we're going to be capped. And if your reserve funds aren't where they need to be when you get to that point, you're in dire straits. So picking back on all the unknowns, the good news is any leftover cash that comes in through the POA automatically goes to reserves.
You're going to burn a third of those hookup fees in a single pump.
Yep.
One pump. And we're going to need how many pumps? 3? And that's long-term, next 8 years, 10 years. And if you don't have it, you got to finance it. Yeah, that's what we know now.
Yeah, but you got those pump expenses in your expenses already. They're already covered.
Sure, I understand.
So what I would say you should do is, if you want to raise it, assessments 5% earmark that 5% to go straight to reserves because you already got your expenses covered. And tell the people out there that you're doing that for that reason, to build up your reserves. And one of these days, people, we're going to quit, even though we realize, or we feel like, because I've heard this from prior boards, even when I first came on, is that every time we give up a 1% increase in assessment, we have lost $175,000. Forever. I mean, okay, I can gouge people forever too.
I don't think that's what we're doing, Bruce. I think we're reacting to what the situation is, and with all of the uncertainties that we're probably going to experience over the next couple of years, I'm not comfortable.
Well, I'm just a little uncomfortable when you have right now, when you have capital expenditures doubled what your depreciation is. That just tells me that you're spending things on capital that's over and above what you're replacing.
I can give you a good example of what he's talking about. I'll make a proposal right now. We got 182 people on the dock waiting list. Who's willing to take on the second if a motion is made, not making one, that there should be no dock next year or the next year? Which one? Because you're going to save $245,000. There's a little over 1% right there. There's your 4%. Yeah, but so I give you the community of 4%, but you don't get a dock, or you don't get your road paved, or you don't get.
Well, see, like that's the point. Is what are you going to give up?
Right, because the only new thing you're getting
giving
is
up
a
the
dock.
new docks. By the way, that just decreases your revenue.
Oh, no, it can't, because you almost opened the door there, but I'm keeping my mouth shut. This goes back to 2018, folks, and by the way, go back and look at the videos of what we've been talking about, what I just said.
Anybody else got anything?
So before we vote on the budget, I would like to, you asked me what number I wanted to put in there. I just want to say, I know that you guys are probably tired of me fighting for this issue, but this has been going on since before I even lived in the village. The a previous board voted to put in this boat launch in Kahiti, and then another project came up, and it was negotiated to do a different project first, and they said, just wait till next year and we'll do that one. And then it's been below the line, below the line, below the line, below the line every year that I've lived here. So all I'm asking is that, instead of just letting it fall out entirely, to put a number in there, and if it needs to be in 2023, I'm perfectly okay with that, because we have contingencies. Again, we have a CCI deal that's about to go through, and we have that land is prime and has always been planned for, it was on the master plan for townhouses, so that's going to impact what happens there. But just to make sure that it, you know, doesn't completely fall off the radar for those people who have been waiting for it for so long, I'd like to see a number put in there.
Well, just because the prior board decided to do that, in my estimation, the current board really has the onus to
Agreed.
make that decision. And frankly, based on the fact that there are 2 public boat launches that close to Kahiti, why would we build one?
How close?
It's within 3 miles
I don't think
of
it's
your
that
entry
close.
gate.
How far are the boat launches from?
Clayton knows,
Kahiti.
because he's the one that did the research. There are two boat
Because I
launches.
mapped it the last time you said that, and it was like 16 minutes away. Do you know, do you know how far they are? Public boat launches?
What were they?
30 minutes by water to get back, pick up your guests or whatever.
Did
They're
you hear
both
that?
within 3 miles
Did
of
you
the
hear that
Kahiti entry
explanation?
gate.
But it's 30 minutes by water to get back over to the dock. Whatever, okay. It's your call. I mean, it's the board's call. I just hate to see it just completely disappear because of contingencies.
Anybody support putting more money in for Kahiti boat launch?
Put it below the line.
Why?
Why not?
Well, because putting it below the line just means we're never going to do it.
This board approved it, but this board obviously it does, because it's been below the line since, I don't know what year, Marty probably knows, but
I mean, we're giving them.
it's been a long time.
Let's give it to them.
Well, we approved this already. We approved it last year, in this year's budget.
I thought the issue
This
was
board
you
approved
talked to
it.
TVA and it was virtually impossible to agree with their conditions.
At that point, yes.
But I talked to TVA after that, and that's not a hard and fast thing. They will work with us on that.
Yeah, as long as we sign their onerous agreement.
That's what I was talking to him about, was that agreement.
I talked to them too, and they said the agreement is the agreement.
That's
No.
that's not what they told me when I.
Frankly, until we decide what we're doing with the land around the Kahiti boat docks.
Correct.
I don't think that we should plan for anything else that goes in that area. That's my opinion.
I want to see the contentious agreement before I make a decision.
You've actually seen it. It was in the board package, I believe, back in June.
She says there's another one. Let me do A
There's
against
not
B.
another one.
There's not another one.
I spoke with David Keeler at TVA, and I asked him about the agreement, and I said, the issue is especially the board president is having, is not willing to sign this agreement the way that it is. And he said that he would be more than happy to, and his expectation was that it would not cost any more than the $1,000 submittal for the permit application.
But that's not the way the agreement is
I
worded.
understand, and if you let me finish, I will go on to say that he said if you want to put into the agreement that if it's going to cost, because you wouldn't get that $1,000 back even if it costs more. Once you submit the application, you go through the process, that $1,000 is spent. So his offering was, we will call you and get approval before we spend one penny over the $1,000. Now, in the original agreement, it was very open-ended, and I completely understood why Rick was reticent to sign an agreement that was very open-ended.
I've talked to him too. He wants the agreement signed. He'll give us a phone call if we go over the number. Yeah,
Well,
I don't know. I have a problem with
but we would
contracts that are
have
that
to
open-ended.
approve going over the number, and like I said, because we already have a boat dock in that area, his expectation is
Carla, we
that
can
it's not
argue
gonna be a
about this
problem.
all day. So here's the question for the rest of the board. Do you want to put a Kahiti boat launch into the plan?
I would say, don't put it in if you don't know the impact to the parking lot. If you know the impact to the parking lot, then maybe you can put it in, because it's not a standalone deal.
Yeah, the parking lot was $90,000. Because you have to have a 40-foot long space to park a boat and a trailer.
Okay, but we can, I don't know, I mean, we could talk about this ad nauseum, but the point is, we did not want to encourage day use of that area, so.
Well, yeah, but what are you going to do if you take your boat and you launch it there? What are you going to do with your car and your trailer?
Put your trailer back in storage, just the same way that we do now.
You're going to tie your boat up to what?
The pier that was in the budget, or your boat slip.
That makes no sense at all to me. I'm sorry.
You're putting it in right where the boat slips are. Why wouldn't you just put your boat in the slip?
There are no owned boat launches in Tellico Village as it stands today. They're all public.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that that vote was 7-0 to put that in the budget last year, so
Things changed.
Okay.
Now, the question is, does the board want to put a Kahiti boat launch in?
At this point, I'm saying no, let's get on with it.
Okay, let's.
That's my position, but you got 6 other board members.
Pat? Bruce?
No.
Marty?
No,
Okay.
too many open ends.
So we'll move on.
Okay, but it was in the budget for this year, and it kept being, it was in the October meeting, it was in things, capital requests still to be made this year. So it's not like I was just neglectful and didn't say anything about it. And I
Fine.
actually did say something about it.
We need to move on. So I'm going to present a series of budget resolutions. I'm going to ask for a motion and a second on each one. If there's discussion from the board, you know, that's always welcome. So let's start with the first one. The first one is approval of the 2022 operating budget for revenues, expenses, and net income. Motion. Steve.
Second.
Marty. Discussion. All in favor? 7-0. The second resolution is approval of the 2022 capital plan totaling $3,948,780. Motion. Pat? Second? Steve? Discussion? All in favor? 7-0. The third resolution is approval of the 2022 monthly assessment of $153.85, representing a 5% increase over the 2021 rate. Motion. Marty? Second. Pat? Discussion. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6-1. The chair dissents.
The chair voted against it?
Yep. The fourth resolution is approval of the 2022 reserves plan for funding and withdrawals. Motion. Steve. Second. Pat. Discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Fifth resolution, approval of the 2022 financing plan, paying down $557,259 of debt for principal and interest for 2022, including the TRDA lease payment of $400,000. Motion. Steve, second. Sue? Discussion?
Yeah, if we go through and get this professional reserve study done, and the number comes in, I would suggest that we look at that to see if we can't bump that number up to pay more debt down. If we come in and we're on target to get to our reserve balances.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is a minimum. Just like this year, we bought off the TOCA loan because we had cash.
All in favor? 7-0. The sixth resolution, approval of the 2022 proposed water and sewer rates representing a 0% increase over 2021. Motion. Carla. Second. Sue. Discussion?
Yes. You showed the slide. We seriously need to go back and look at these rates, these hookup fees and all of this.
We do?
Well,
that's the next motion.
Okay, well, okay, I'm out of order then.
Well, I have a question on this one. So the question then is, for number 6, the rates that we had in 21, they cover the increases that we just had in December, as well as the projected June increase from LUB?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All in favor? 7-0. Okay. Resolution 7, approval of the proposed 2022 water and sewer connection fee increase of 5% plus a $300 water fee, meter fee for water, which brings the new rate to $13.50, and 5% for sewer. The new rate equals $14.70. Motion. Pat? Second. Marty? Discussion. Is this the one you wanted to talk about, Pat? Okay. All in favor? 7-0. The eighth resolution is approval of a 10% materials increase for tank installations. Motion? Steve? Second. Sue? Discussion?
Yeah, question, and I guess, Clayton, you still here? Given the fact that we're probably moving towards smaller tanks, are we still going to need a 10% increase?
I feel that we do, because we're still buying big tanks too, because where the market is and availability, we're using whatever we can get. So it may get where we can't get smaller tanks and we have to buy big tanks.
Okay.
Other discussion? All in favor? 7-0. The next 5 motions relate to amenity pricing plans. The first one, approval of the golf fee schedule representing a 3% increase in the aggregate effective January 1st, 2022. Motion. Marty? Second. Carla? Discussion?
Just as another reminder, that in those fees, your Twilight Annual gets you break even at 33 rounds, greens fees only. They've already averaged 46. My proposal, I think it ought to be 40, but I know where I stand. I just wanted to be on the record.
No problem.
Thank you.
And
all in favor?
Well, wait a second, and just to make sure, Steve's got a point, and to a degree, we all agree. But if you go back, again, the point being that if you go back, we were 17% utilized on that twilight rate. We have since changed the culture of Tellico Village to play more in the afternoon, increasing that by 83% and increasing these rounds up. It would be nice to charge full rates and make a whole bunch of money, but it would drive your patrons away to other courses, and that's the point. Thank you, Steve. I accept your point. But
Okay,
disagree.
all in favor of the rate increase? Opposed? 6 to 1.
6 to 1, all right, I'm back in the saddle.
The second is approval of a 4% increase in Recreation Department memberships effective January 1st, 2022. Steve? Second? Pat? Discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
Sorry, I'm here. I was reading ahead.
The third is approval of a 3% increase in dock lease fees effective January 1st, 2022. Motion.
I move.
Bruce, second. Sue, discussion?
Yep, here we go again.
Make it short.
I'm going to make it short. If I take
We've
these-
heard the speech before.
I know, and I won't give you the speech, but if I take the latest finance and advisory numbers, and again, the capital, if I just compare apples to apples using these numbers, and I take golf, and I take the revenue and the expense and the rounds played, it comes out to be $42.59 a round. If I then take what we're proposing here, and I recalculate, in order to break even, you have to go up to $4.68 a round. Okay, so golf on the current rounds is $4.68. Recreation, using the same format, using the number of members to what we're proposing to go up to what we generated for the last 10 months, we have to increase $48 per month per member. Okay, with a 3% increase, and you can go back and look at the videos because I've been pointing out the excess revenue over expense since 2018 and how we've been amassing that, and there's a debate on it's not amassed, it's spent. Okay, so let's take 769 slips. That includes boats, PWCs, and kayak. Total revenue $963,549. Net income $238,403. We divide it out. In effect, you need, if you follow the same format we're using on golf and recreation, you should give every slip owner a 25% reduction in fee. Oh, it ain't going to happen, but I don't think a 3% increase ought to happen either. There's my point.
Can you remind us what the Marine Advisory Committee recommended?
0.
Thank you.
If you look at the cash flows as presented, in 2023, with a 3% increase, the docks and the fuel still runs a negative cash flow of about 23 grand.
All in favor? All opposed? It's 5-2. The fourth is approval of a reduction in the kayak storage fees to $200 per year, effective January 1st, 2022, and a 0% increase in personal watercraft slips. Motion. Pat? Second. Marty? Discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Finally, approval to maintain fees for RV storage and ACC reviews at their present level, i.e. a 0% increase. Motion. Pat? Second. Steve? Discussion? All in favor? 7-0. And then the final board budget resolution is acceptance of the 2023, and acceptance, not approval. Acceptance of the 2023 through 2032 10-year plan as a planning document subject to change based on continued review. Motion. Steve. Second. Pat. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? 6-1. Okay, that completes the budget resolutions, which brings us to the end of our formal program. And what's that?
Other.
Yeah. I have one other, and it pertains to the board election. What's the percentage of people who have voted so far, Missy? Do you know? Just ballpark? 36%, which is excellent but not great. Voting ends at noon tomorrow, and results will be announced at 2 p.m. on Friday in the POA conference room. Is there anybody in here who has not voted in this election? Yeah, I'd like to put you on the spot if you didn't. Yeah, ready, aim, fire. Okay, so tell all your friends and neighbors that they need to vote, and they've got until noon tomorrow to do it. Are there any other items from the board?
Norris has got a question on here. He says, back to the vote on no water rate increase, is that for the full year 2022? Yes.
Yes.
Right. And then Bruce covered the accompanying following years with a proposed increase projected. Yeah, that's in the out years.
Yep.
Okay. And other than that, we've covered everything other than some of the people are disagreeing with your votes on the 3% slip increase.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
Any other items from the board? I will open it up to the audience for very brief comments because we've run way over and somebody is in this room in the next 10 minutes. So.
I just want to thank Kevin and Charlotte and the team. Great job with all the work the last 3 months. Thank you.
And maybe next year it won't be as much of a slog.
Even more.
Okay. Yes.
My name is Ken Stuppy.
You're going to have to stand closer to the microphone, sir.
Or it's not on. Better?
Yes.
My name is Ken Stuppy. I've been a resident of Kahidi since 2010. I chaired the Kahidi surveillance, gate surveillance system back in 13, 14, and 15. And what I've tried to do, and I'm actually glad that it didn't happen today, is I tried to get on the agenda today in order to address some issues that myself as a property owner has had with POA management. However, it seems like I've been put into solitary confinement for some reason, as I've gotten no response back from anyone on the board relative to trying to get on the agenda. So Mr. Blau or Mr. Blazer, could you please tell me why property owners cannot address their issues on a board meeting?
I'm going to ask our counsel to speak to this issue.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here. Certainly, property owners have every right to address the board and raise issues with the board. However, due to some of your communication with the board, particularly the threats of legal action, it's been referred to me, and I have advised the board not to respond further.
There was absolutely no threat of legal action, none whatsoever.
I beg to differ with that. I read all the stuff you sent me, and you've mentioned legal action multiple times.
And what I did say...
we're going to cut this off at this point.
What I did say is you're not leaving me any choice because you're now allowing me as a property owner to address my issues and address changes that I wanted to make to this board. So it's not me that's threatening to use legal action, it's you. So you have prevented all board members from talking to me?
There's been no threat of legal action towards you, and at this point, we're going to go ahead and cut off the discussion.
I don't know. What happened to transparency? What happened to accountability? Why don't you answer my question?
Thank you, Mr. Stuppy. Any other comments from the audience? Okay, with that, this ordeal is over.
Thank you very much.
All right.